Harold Fannon is the greatest rookie in the history of the NFL, and all of our other great observations from week one. That's what we're talking about today on Stealing Bananas, our Sunday night edition. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find the Stealing Signals newsletter, which will hit your inboxes Monday and Tuesday, breaking down every game at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. I just decided, Shawn, like right in this second, that Harold Fannon was going to be the hook. We got a ton of stuff to talk about. Week one is always...
But really mostly Harold Fannon.
Mostly Harold Fannon. Week one is pretty bonkers. It's always pretty bonkers. And the responses you get are always... I mean, we always say don't overreact, and yet people do overreact. So my hook for tomorrow's Stealing Signals, I'll tell you about it. It'll be a little bit of the hook on the show today. But like, I went through a few things today. I wrote week one is all about how you cope so you don't overreact. A short list of the definitive things I thought about on Sunday. I wish I would have ignored projections-based stuff more and had some more Jets because of how talented those guys are. I can't believe people ignored how obvious the Colts were from the projections-based stuff. I can't believe people bought one small sample year of Tank Bigsby over the clear Longview stuff Travis Etienne had over him. I can't believe I cared so much about the Longview stuff instead of understanding Zach Charbonnet is just a better fit for the current Seattle offense than Ken Walker. I wish I was more agnostic on rookie talent and just went ham on somebody like Emeka Egbuka, who was, when the drum beat was deafening. I can't believe people are agnostic on rookie talent and didn't realize how good Harold Fannon is and just take him in every single draft when he was super cheap. So basically throughout the day today, Shawn, everything was a referendum on something, even in my own head. And I just wanted to kind of share that for the listeners at the top, because I'm pretty sure everyone else had that experience. I got a lot of, the responses from the people that have listened to me tell them all my takes for, multiple months. And they're like, well, no, you were wrong about this thing. And it's my turn to tell you something now. And so that's what you get all through week one. I've told that story before. But it's always fascinating in week one. Everything feels like it's, oh God, I missed the whole big picture thing. I should have done everything different. Should have done everything this way. I should have been taking more of that particular approach. Every situation is fairly unique. And I think overall week one went fairly well.
Yeah. Week one is interesting. I wish that I could say that week one had been more fun, but I do feel like mostly what we got was terrible, terrible football. And as a result, I think you can ignore this week one even more than in the past. Then I always like to write a don't underreact piece after week one, because, let's go in the opposite direction and just tell people, like, don't underreact to these things. And there are some things like that.
Oh, yeah.
I do think that it's valid to feel like, now, I do want to stipulate that I've gotten almost all the games in. This was an epic day of blitzing through the games, but I haven't watched Rams, Texans. I haven't watched the one that you just sort of referenced with Egbuka. I haven't watched the Bucks and the Falcons.
My bad.
Now, I do want to note there. I just want to note there that the Carolina Panthers scored at will on this Atlanta Falcons team to close last year. And if you watch the Carolina Panthers today, you would have thought that this was the introduction to football for every single coach they had and every single player on their roster.
Oh, and Shawn, I'll say that you don't know anything about it, but Egbuka's maybe not a great example because he didn't have that amazing of a day. I thought the Bucks actually didn't look great, but you'll get a chance to watch that.
And I didn't get to see the Sunday night game, which I assume that those teams look like Super Bowl contenders because they're very, very good. One of the reasons that we took a lot of Lamar Jackson and took even some Josh Allen is that we have a ton of respect for those teams. Among the elite teams, the two teams that looked awful was the Detroit Lions. And I think that when you consider that they lost their coordinators and you think about what happened to the Eagles in that sort of down year where they lost their coordinators, I'm not saying I think the Lions are done by any stretch. I think the main takeaway is that if you had to pick an NFC Super Bowl leader right now, I think it would be the Green Bay Packers.
Should
when
be,
you
yeah.
when you add Micah Parsons, and then even though they had some missed plays today, I mean, one of the things just when when you get kind of the play right but the year wrong, which is the crucial thing. I mean, you've got to get it right in the right year. But to be so excited about Jordan Love last year and have what happened happen, and then to feel like, yeah, he's going to bounce back, and I do kind of want some, but then to have drafts kind of go in a weird way where it doesn't really work to get that piece. I mean, this is going to sound like an absurd kind of note, but we sort of finished our very last drafts just yesterday, talking about actually kind of going out and getting our favorite late guys on every team, because if you're wrong, then you just replace them. But if you're right, then it changes everything. I mean, for the two of us, and hopefully for many listeners, the fact that Harold Fannon really does look like he is going to be not just a startable piece, but maybe the impact piece that you have to have. And we have him on basically every team. Ben, there was one early draft we did where he didn't get drafted, and like really held myself back, only bidding 63. I don't think anybody else bid going in and look at it. And I'm looking at that later. I'm like, yeah, maybe you didn't want to bid 63, but nobody else in the league thought it was worth bidding on him at all.
I didn't see that when I went through our bids on the first run. All I saw was all of the Troy Franklin bids. But I would have probably told you to up that one.
We got Troy Franklin in that one as well, also for 63.
Also for 63, yeah.
I don't know if you noticed this, but we did have a league where our top priority was Quentin Johnston, and our second player was Trevor Etienne, and they were both $1 bids, and one other team bid, and we lost the virtual coin flip. So congratulations to us on that. Right.
Nice.
But you think through that and you're like, I mean, Jordan Love was actually going in the exact same range as Harold Fannon. And if you're going to get Harold Fannon on every team, you got to kind of pick him there every time. And I mean, I would far prefer to have Harold Fannon than Jordan Love, but it is frustrating. You know, you think about all the stuff with Jaden Reed, and probably he's not going to do much this season because maybe they won't need to throw that much. I mean, their defense was just extraordinary today.
That was my takeaway. I'm interested that you're starting today with so much Jordan Love hype. I mean, he was very good, but he only had to throw 22 passes. And my takeaway from this game was that they're going to be boring because their defense is so good.
Could very well be. I think they'll be boring in a quick strike-ish sort of way, though, which, I mean, you can score some points that way, especially, I mean, the biggest takeaways that I had from today, Ben, to kind of follow up on your notes from earlier, were, one, quarterbacks are going to be like the entire story, and the entire story is whether or not your QB can run. Now, there may be a few kind of fun exceptions. Like the one theory of the season that it feels like we hit on completely after 1 week, but with the big stipulation that the Cincinnati Bengals, number one, it doesn't matter what the rhetoric is coming out of there. They are never ready to start the season. I mean, they got manhandled.
They should have fired Zach Taylor like 3 years ago.
I mean,
so they were talking about during the game that he was getting them up early and blaring loud music at 8 a.m. So everything was an early rising thing. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so if they do get off to a hot start, you're going to convince all these professionals to do this every year from here on out. This is the only way you can get your team ready for week one, is to get them out of bed at 8 a.m. with loud music, or I mean at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. with loud music or whatever it is. I mean, it's just absurd.
22-11 in first downs. I mean, the yards per play in that game was somewhat humorous because it was 4.6.
The Browns had 22.
2.9.
Yeah. The Browns have 22? Yeah. The Browns should have won that game. Sorry, continue.
The Cincinnati Bengals, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown, averaged 2.9 yards per play.
Wow. I haven't looked at the game stats there, but my note was Bengals seemingly didn't run as many plays or have as many yards. Browns probably should have won. That was for me to look up.
71 to 49 in plays.
49 plays. That was just from watching it. I was like, this is a huge discrepancy. Flacco throws 2 picks that are juggled up in the air. They miss an extra point. They miss a short field goal late, and they end up losing this game by 1 point. And I mean, the Browns just objectively should have won this game. Like, the Bengals looked bad, unfortunately, but
And obviously it was disappointing that within the context of Joe Flacco throwing 45 passes that we only got, and Judy, because of the kind of garbage catch at the end, does still have an okay day.
Yeah.
But the 5 receptions of 66 yards were terrible. It was also a bummer because even though they should have easily won without this, there was a key moment either late in the third or early in the fourth where Fannon and Judy dropped easy third down conversions consecutively. And you always hate it when your two guys do that.
Yep.
But so that one worked out the way we were saying. And then this isn't even a real fantasy football thing, but the Cam Little theory also looks pretty good through 1 week.
Yes, Cam Little buried a bunch of field goals. You mentioned the QBs. I said to you before we jumped on, but I want to throw it in here as we're talking about it, that maybe one thing structurally I'm concerned about is I was pretty into elite QBs, and I didn't really think through. I said to you that one of my big macro takes from week 1 is that QBs are about to run for a lot of touchdowns because you get the tush push conversation all off season, and then it passes, and then we see. And you told me, your thought on the Daniel Jones thing that situationally was a little bit fluky, but they called QB sneaks at the 1 yard line twice. Daniel Jones gets 2 1-yard rushing TDs. The Jets do it with Justin Fields, who's going to have his own rushing TDs. He had a second rushing TD on a 4th down bootleg. I mean, there's going to this one of the big stats I was referencing this offseason with the 4 elite QBs is they all had rushing stuff that kind of differentiated them from the other players. And so the big thing for Allen and Hurts is they both had double-digit rushing TDs both of the last 2 years, and no other quarterback has had more than 6 in either year. Going to have more than 6 this year. He has 2. Daniel Jones is probably going to have 10 when we're said and done. I mean, these guys are there's going to be several QBs.
Those two guys are very, very athletic. I mean, yeah. Daniel Jones is kind of a laughing stock because he had to play for the Giants and because he does miss some passes. And because when he was ready to break like an 80-yard touchdown run that one time,
he fell on his face.
But that obscures
the fact that Daniel Jones
is actually very athletic. And so when you're talking about a rushing QB and Daniel Jones, I mean, that's always been kind of part of it for him. It's one of the reasons why I mean, this is an embarrassing note because Daniel Jones is not good or popular, but I still have Daniel Jones stashed on a lot of those dynasty teams because he's a perfect fit for the RV Triflex League or any league like that is super flex and even further mitigates the scoring of passing quarterbacks, which is absurd. I mean, if anything, we should be trying to figure out formats. I mean, it's very straightforward. You give the quarterback 6 points for a passing touchdown because that's what touchdowns are worth, and passing quarterbacks need to be inflated, not deflated, right? But I mean, Daniel Jones can play. So the other, and again, some of these, you always, so one of the things that happens with week 1 is that the things that don't go your way, you tend to have very sort of polar responses to of either A, it doesn't really matter. And you know that a lot of the stuff doesn't really matter because, I mean, Jamar Chase went 2 for 26 and that's like not great, but it also doesn't really matter. We're not worried that Jamar Chase is going to like dramatically step back. It's almost a weird thing where T. Higgins leads the team in receiving, and I'm much more worried about his 3 for 33 because it seems like him not being a part of the offense, which he wasn't today, is potentially what could happen and would be problematic.
There was a lot of Chase Brown. Like their first drive was a touchdown drive. They only scored 17 all day. The first drive was all Chase Brown.
They had 49 plays and he had 21 carries.
Shawn, what? I didn't look at their box score yet, but are you serious? Like these are the stuff you're telling me about what the Bengals did. I had my little notes. It was like, you got to go look at this. It seems like it was pretty bad, but what you're telling me happened is worse than what I would have guessed.
I mean, Dylan Sampson and Chase Brown rushed 33 times in this game, and they gained 72 yards. So,
my God, though, but like I just pulled it up, the total yards, 327 to 141. The Browns dominated the Bengals.
Yeah.
God. The Browns, who are supposed to be playing for the first overall pick and are terrible, and their highest paid player isn't going to play this year, and their second round pick is not with the team yet, and they mostly played rookies, and they just absolutely dominated the Bengals. But somehow the Bengals won 17-16.
And at some point in the season, Dylan Gabriel's going to come out and he's going to execute that offense just like Joe Flacco did today. So the other thing that was, it's impossible not to have watched week 1 and thought to yourself that every single team that has employed Russell Wilson since Sean Payton was like, oh my God, what is happening here? Like, it's just trying to lose games. When you have the Pittsburgh Steelers coming out and they go 4-2 with Justin Fields, and then they bench him for Russell Wilson, and then that torpedoes their season, they go get Aaron Rodgers, who we know is washed up. I mean, this team is so poorly coached on offense that Kenneth Gainwell was the focal point of their offensive game plan, and yet they still won. And at the same time, their supposedly elite defense was shredded by Justin Fields, who finally has a team that the coaching staff is like, no, we brought him in on purpose because we know what he's good at and we wanted to do those things.
Right.
As opposed to like, we don't know why we have him on the team and we're going to run him out there and make him do all the stuff he's terrible at.
Yeah. So, watching that game today was like, this is what we've been talking about for years with Justin Fields, is if you just did this with him and ran an offense around him, he would actually look functional. Anyway, let's finish your rant on Russell Wilson, because I wrote the same thing for my big takes for this show. He sucks at football. I wrote he's just so bad.
He tried to throw a sidearm pass to a guy today, and it was worse than the pass where Tavares Jackson, like 15 years ago, like jumped on top of the offensive linemen who were in front of him and then lobbed the ball up. Like,
I vaguely remember this one. It was a weird play. They have to bench him for week 2, right? Like, they literally have to bench him after one game.
You have to, and if you don't,
if Dart's not ready, you play Winston.
And we've talked about the Bengals should have definitely fired Zach Taylor, and the Titans should have been one and done with Callahan. But the coach, and again, I don't know about the Sunday night game, but I certainly feel like the Bills defense, if you're a defensive coach and you're the part leading, that they should have fired their coach despite decent results. How is Brian Daboll employed in the NFL? Because Daniel Jones was a laughingstock. The Colts didn't punt today. The Colts scored on every possession, right? Yeah. It was the first time that they had done that in, forever. They scored on every possession. And by contrast, Brian Daboll is out there running it off. And so it was kind of funny because you don't want to be wrong about this stuff in general. And then in some ways, like, you don't care about the stuff that you've talked with your buddy about, but you're also kind of tracking it because, like, some part of you wants to be right and some part of you wants your buddy to be right so your buddy won't feel bad. And, like, every single pass to Wan'Dale Robinson, I was thinking, this is the most hilarious thing that I've ever witnessed. Because Russell Wilson, in the midst of the worst game of all time, is going to get 20 targets to Wan'Dale. Now, it did slow down as the game went along, but and, I mean, he can't be the head coach, and Russell Wilson cannot be the quarterback when we wake up tomorrow.
When I shared the intro stuff, and I had the I can't believe how people ignored the obvious projection-based stuff on the Colts. I initially had written Wan'Dale Robinson, and then I was like, I can't write this because everyone's just going to tell me the Wan'Dale Robinson stuff was actually correct because he only got like 50 yards on his 19 targets or whatever it was. So I had to take him out of that little introduction thing because it was just too funny how perfect he got all the volume. And I'm like, this is what I was saying. Wan'Dale Robinson's going to get so many targets, but also, like, if I say that to anyone, they're just going to say, yeah, and this is what we were saying. It didn't matter. Like, he didn't score very many points at all. But they gotta bench. I think it will matter, and I do think Wan'Dale Robinson's going to wind up mattering this year. But they have to bench Russell Wilson like yesterday as soon as possible. One thing I want to share, a random thing. It's not so much about the games, but I'm finding it fascinating that we have such similar stuff to talk about because the stuff that you're hitting on is all the stuff that I had as the biggest takeaways from today as well. Like I wrote the Colts look awesome. I really want to talk through them. And it's so funny what you said about Daniel Jones missing throws. The second play of the game, he has an RPO. He's supposed to just throw a quick hit to Michael Pittman, and he like doesn't get the laces and like ducks it. If two Michael Pittmans were standing on top of each other, they wouldn't have been able to catch it. It goes flying out of bounds. And yet that quarterback who's like, oh God, this is Daniel Jones again on the second pass of the game. He can't even throw to a receiver who's standing there for like the easiest catch. That quarterback went on to execute an offense that, like, this is what we've been saying. about Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson that they were going to pick Daniel Jones simply because he can execute the offense, because all this offense really requires is the ability to do the RPO stuff, have a little bit of mobility, and complete the short passes with the catch and runs. And the offense looked unstoppable because they have so much talent. They really, I mean, Tyler Warren looks awesome. He's going to crush because we talked about the RPO, first read target stuff. I talked about it with Michael Pittman 2 years ago. That's why I had 156 targets. Talked about last year how Downs had taken that stuff. You know, I've done this research on the RPOs, consolidating targets to the number one target, and it seemed like Downs took that stuff last year when Pittman was banged up, and that was a big part of why Downs kind of flipped the target shares. Tyler Warren is their RPO first read target guy now. I mean, he got like 6 of those in this game, the RPOs and the quick throws. That's going to be massive for him. There's some really interesting tight end stuff from this week, but
so that was the other big takeaway I had was that the quarterback rushing element and whether your guy can get out there and convert. You know, think about the Justin Herbert play, even at the end of the Chiefs game, but so many plays like that. And then the other thing is that I just want to play tight ends at all of the positions.
Yeah.
Like I just want to go through and play them at all the flex spots and also at all the receiver spots.
It's so funny because I was reading last
receiver
year.
Was basically done today. Everything was tight ends.
Yeah. I was reading last year some stuff back after week 1, stealing signal stuff as I was going through some things setting up for this year, like a week ago. And one of my big commentaries after week 1 last year was that the tight ends didn't score. Everyone was freaking out about the tight ends. Do you remember this? After week 1 last year, no one scored. It wasn't just the elite tight ends. None of the tight ends scored. And the opposite was true this week. Like I was like, God, I wish we had more Trey McBride. And I was like, man, the Brock Bauer stuff, not like as perfect as you'd want because he ends up leaving a little early. And some of the stuff early was kind of weird. And he has a drop in there. It's a 100-yard day. He has 3 huge plays. He looks unstoppable. Like that's just kind of what they're not.
He and Trey McBride are so gapped from
everyone.
Just like,
yeah,
even NFL humans. I mean, you watch them and you're like, so I've made this point before and I'm sure it's just absurd, but I mean, they're so gapped from like peak Rob Gronkowski and peak Travis Kelce that like if they played on viable teams, because I mean, the Arizona Cardinals almost lost to the Saints today. and Kyler Murray was throwing so many passes where I went back recently. I was trying to figure out some stuff on Cam Ward this summer. And I ran across all of this stuff about, you know, different like prospect grades from, you know, scouting people on the quarterbacks, you know, over the last 10 to 15 years. And there were all of these glowing grades about Kyler Murray as a passer. And I'm just like, now I realized that he had like a decent stretch in one of his seasons where the passing numbers were very good. And certainly I think some of the injuries have limited him some. And it was interesting because I told you that one of the reasons I was kind of interested in him, and I don't think either one of us ended up actually drafting him anywhere, but interested in him because he said he was going to run more. And he did look more mobile today. He looks more explosive, like with his first step and getting up to speed, much more athletic than.
And they called designed runs. So he didn't do a lot of design runs last year. And then they asked, I can't think of his name. I want to say Steichen, Gannon about it this offseason. And he was like, if they were going to change it up because he had like a career low in rushes per game, which was mainly because they took away the design runs. And Gannon said, we're not going to change what we're doing, like very directly. They did. Like that was one of my big takeaways that I wrote about that, like in like offseason ceiling signals, like don't expect Kyler to add the rushing back, the design runs back. They did design runs today. They called them. So they lied straight up about that. And that's going to be favorable for Kyler for sure. Anyway,
just thinking about all the
what about the pass play?
All the guys he couldn't see, all the passes that were tipped when he had guys wide open.
The play from the 3-yard line where they got the cover 0 and the man coverage, and Marvin Harrison won over the middle, and Kyler threw it like behind him. It would have been a 97-yard touchdown. I went back to the replay a couple times and counted the defenders to make sure there wasn't some deep safety on the field. There's no one there. All 11 defenders are accounted for in the screen. You know, when people go back and watch all 22, they're going to share this play and be like, ooh, Kyler wishes he had that one back. Because Marvin Harrison has like 2 steps in the middle of the field, and there's not a defender over top of him. And if Kyler puts it on him anywhere close to in stride, he's just running down the center of the field for 97 yards.
Ben, I don't get too much of the commentary trying to watch like every single NFL game in one day. But I did get on that one because I did watch it from several angles, and like every single angle, the commentator was just like, "You can't miss that throw." It's like you can't miss that. It's like you can't miss that.
You cannot miss that throw. I was gonna say on this point about watching the games. I'm having so much fun talking with you about it, and we have a lot of the same reads here. But I wanted to share something that I think is kind of an interesting step back, big picture thing. Because in the last couple of years, I've shared with the listeners and the readers at Stealing Signals that I changed my process to more closely mirror yours, or just directly mirror yours, which is to watch all of the games individually. I used to watch all the games at the same time and make all the notes at the same time, watch them in real time, not like red zone, but watch all of them on one screen. And that was difficult. Well, today I was having some technical difficulties with DVR and being able to rewind. And so and it's week 1, and I was so excited. I put all the games on. I was watching them my old way, and I was like, I'll catch up to each of them individually later. I still want to do that. I started doing that process in 2023 and did it all last year, and I have loved that switch because I feel like there's so much more context that I get out of it. I want to go back to that. And I was having enough issues with this, Shawn, that I watched the whole wave of morning games with all of the games on. But then I still at 2:00 my time, so 10 a.m. I'm Pacific is when the games start. 1 is when the second wave starts. 2:00 when like the games were over for long enough to start getting posted, I went back through all the games, and it's kind of annoying. I was actually like almost falling asleep because I'd already seen like half of most of the plays, but I still wanted to go through each of the morning 8 games, and I did. So I've watched a ton of football today. I did it both ways. But the point I'm trying to drive home is I had a perception of several of the things from watching all the games, not even just red zone, but watching all the games and tracking. Because when you're watching all of them, you're not worried about spoilers. So I was tracking the box scores and stuff in real time to a certain degree. Like I said, I didn't really see the Bengals one. But there's like, I'll give you an example. The Dolphins, my perception of the Dolphins was that they were the implosion that everyone said they were going to be, and that they were just absolutely terrible. Couldn't get anything going, and this is going to be a horrible season. Mike McDaniel's getting fired in 3 games. And I saw them score the touchdown, and I was pumped that at least Achane scored late, and the announcers were like, they finally score and all this stuff. And that was me having seen the game and seen them struggle at times, like while I'm watching 7 other games, and then also kind of filling in the blanks from the fact that none of their drives finished well, like you kind of have to do because you can't watch all 8 games that closely. Then I went back and watched that game, and what I saw was so most of that is somewhat true, but the Dolphins moved the ball way better than I thought they did. They turned the ball over in plus territory multiple times. They also just didn't run a lot of drives because the Colts were managing, and this could be an issue for them because their defense looks like it's not going to be very good, but the Colts were managing the ball, and like the Colts' whole RPO and short catch and run, pass and catch and run, high success rate offense, right, is like a long drive offense. It's like a 12 to 14 play touchdown. And so when they finally scored in the fourth quarter, the announcers are going, God, they finally scored. That was only their 3rd drive of the second half. And I think they only had like 3 in the whole first half, maybe 4. And then Tua was out after that drive. He only played like 6 or 7. And on the first 2 of the second half, they had a turnover on downs on the second one because they're already down by so much. The first drive of the third quarter, it started out looking okay, but Tua threw another pick. He already had one earlier in the first half, plus a fumble in the first half. So like they were just not sustaining, but also just turning the ball over against a team that was sustaining and keeping them off the field. I wrote that their yards per play probably look fine. I haven't looked at those stats yet, but the Dolphins
4.6 there, so better than the teams in the Browns Bengals game.
Yeah. Better than that, but not amazing, but probably looked fine relative to the fact that they didn't score any points until the fourth quarter. And I think they did, actually, if you say that. 4.6 isn't horrible, but they only had
5 for 10 on 3rd down. That's not the end of the world by any stretch. This is
how many drives did they have?
7. Each team had 7 drives.
7 drives, and the last one was Zach Wilson. So Tua literally only played 6 drives, scored a touchdown on the 6th. Of the first 5, 3 of them ended in a turnover. It wasn't that they weren't moving the ball. They were getting first downs. Like you said, they're converting 3rd downs, then turning the ball over.
70 to 46 in total plays.
Yeah, they didn't run any plays because
one of the
things
that continues to jump out to me in all these games. And, you've kind of helped keep me calibrated by pointing out that the actual and overall numbers are not that different than what we've had in the past. But I do think it's important for teams to understand tactically within the game that the way NFL football is currently played, you have a very real chance of simply having almost no possessions in the game.
Yep.
I mean, that was the thing that jumped out the most about the Jets-Steelers game, was that this seemed like a real, actual NFL football game, or just like a football game in general, right? Where you had some back and forth, you had some explosive plays, you had teams in the flow of a game reacting to each other and having exciting things happen. Now, again, this is one where it's kind of unfortunate for the Jets because they should have won fairly easily, but 11 possessions for both teams in that one, and 11 possessions where they also were better on a per play basis. It was just like, this is actual football. Sadly, we're probably not going to get a ton of that in the 2025 season, and teams need to understand that in terms of how they structure every single thing that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that some of the things that you should probably not do are give Tyler Bidet snaps early in the game, or give David Montgomery snaps at any point in time in the game. You only have so many plays to get the ball to Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams, and you're intentionally sucking additional plays out of it when you go the opposite direction. You think, oh, well, I mean, the Lions, they got embarrassed today, but they'll bounce back. They're good. It's fine. It's like, well, you really need to win the number one seed, even though winning the number one seed isn't a guarantee, as we saw last year. But there aren't that many possessions in a game, but there also aren't that many games in a season. So many of the teams came into week one without a viable game plan. And, again, it's always going to be skewed to what we kind of want to have happen. But the Denver Broncos could have easily lost the game today to a horrible and like very early stages of rebuilding Tennessee Titans team, because they didn't feel like it was necessary to play RJ Harvey. And that is just borderline absurd.
Yeah, it really is. You play a rookie quarterback at home, and you're the far more talented roster. Similar thing to what the Dolphins experienced in terms of why they didn't put a lot of points on the board. Nick's turned the ball over 3 times. He struggled in this one. He had multiple other passes that could have been picked as well. It was a bummer to see that. They also fumble a punt. The turnovers are so huge. To your point about the sort of meta of what we're seeing in the NFL right now, I've talked about it a ton. Obviously, defenses have – I keep seeing the thing of like the NFL cyclical, and so they used to play cover 2, and it's circling back around. It's not. Nothing that is said to be cyclical is actually cyclical. Nothing is the same as what it was. Some retro thing coming back in style is not as popular as it was before. It's a retro thing. It's a different version of it. You can call it cyclical, but it's not. The cover 2 coming back in style is not because it's not the same as the way it was 20 years ago. It's a completely different defensive philosophy. The NFL has completely changed in the last half decade from being a sport that for its entire history, defenses thought you had to man up and stop the run and get physical and be tough. And that's how you play defense, and you force teams to beat you in other ways. And now they're like, you've changed the rules so much. You don't allow us to be physical. You don't allow us to do any of these
that would
things.
Always work for like the 1 or 2 teams that were the best defenses in the NFL. But
Yeah,
it was a horrible approach for everyone else.
It wasn't a great approach for anyone else. But I think a lot of it was also the defenses actually finally acquiescing, was understanding that a lot of the rules have changed, and a lot of the offenses from like 2015 to 2020, it was like, look, the rules are changing. Throw the ball more. It's more efficient. And offenses started to do that more and more and more. You get 2020, that year, with no fans in the stands, and the road teams are not experiencing any dip in production, and we get the greatest offensive season in NFL history. And the early part of 2021 is when everything shifted, basically. Everyone was like, well, at this point, we're way behind as a defense, so we got to try something different. And they started basically trying to take away explosive pass plays, and they've shifted in the 5 years since to be way lighter. They don't care about stopping the run anymore. They don't have a lot of run defenders. You don't have those players on the field. And it changes the entire sport. It creates this high success rate, matriculate the ball down the field as a way of, producing points thing, which keeps the clock running. One of the cool things about like 2020 and those eras, when everyone was throwing the ball a ton, is the incompletion stopped the clock. A lot of the completions on pass plays go out of bounds and those things. I think they've changed the clock rules as well to facilitate more running clock over the last couple of years in certain situations. But I mean, when you get a game like the Colts and the Dolphins, and the Colts are completing a lot of short passes and they're maintaining drives and they're running the ball and they're running the ball and then they're throwing short and then they're doing all this stuff. The clock is running the whole time. They have their second drive is a 14 play, 84 yard, 8-minute and 18-second touchdown drive. They also had a 6:46 field goal drive, 17 plays in the first half, a 4:23 9-play field goal drive in the first half. I mean, basically all their first half drives are taking, huge chunks of time off the clock. They had a 9-minute touchdown drive in the second half in 15 plays. I hadn't even scrolled down to the second half yet, but one that went over 9 minutes of game time. There's only 60 minutes in a game. I just described on those few possessions, basically half of the game time, right? I mean, and so that ends up, as you were saying, it also impacts the Colts as well. Even when they're playing a really efficient and great offensive game, they run fewer drives, as you said. Like back in the day, both teams only had 7 possessions. You said back in the day, we would get these teams that would blow up and they would score and score and score and score. They'd score as well as the Colts played in this game. A team 5 years ago would probably score, over 40. They scored 33 in this game. And so it's a different sport. And I think it's a really great point. The other thing with all this, Shawn, and we've talked about this in the last couple of years, but the first year they really started employing it, we saw massive spreads on teams on offense being shown looks instead of the defense being reactionary to what the offense is doing. They're going to do what they want to do. And then the offense is saying, well, if we see that look, then we're going to do something every time. And they started to just do like their answer for that. So we saw in the same season in 2022, I want to say, we saw the Arthur Smith Falcons, the Justin Fields Bears both run like rush attempts per game. They ran way more than any team since like 1990 or whatever. And in the same season, the Tom Brady Bucks and the Justin Herbert Chargers that had Kellen Moore that year or something, they threw in terms of pass attempts per game among the heaviest pass attempts seasons of all time, which was a lot of short passing in those offenses because those were their answers. We've seen a little bit more balance since then as teams have done stuff like what the Cowboys did on Thursday night. And we talked about it a little bit on our Saturday show, but like Dak was throwing into the tough looks, right? You have to go get those pass plays still. But one of the things I saw that was fascinating today in a couple different spots was teams doing the same play back to back. So Demario Douglas scores a touchdown. Drake May throws an out route or like a kind of a back pylon route to Demario Douglas, and it goes incomplete. And the very next play, they run the exact same play because they obviously feel confident that the defense that they're seeing is going to be the same thing on the next play. Whatever they're doing, they do the exact same thing. The other one was in a game you haven't gotten a chance to see yet, but Drake London at one point ran an end zone target route 2 plays in a row, the exact same route. And so you'll see this when you watch the Atlanta game, but it was a somewhat unique route. And I was just like, that was literally the play they just ran. And they're so offenses are so confident that, they're like, that worked. We didn't execute it, but it worked. And they're going to do the same thing defensively because they don't react to what we're doing anymore. They do what they're going to do. So we're just going to call the exact same play the very next play. I saw it somewhere else as well. Those were the 2 examples when I was typing this up that came to my head. But I was like, man, we are at a point where offenses, and so in some respects, that's fun for fantasy because I do think the offenses are pretty good at getting the ball to their best skill players. For a little while there, the meta in the NFL was like, whatever take what the defenses gives you. And we saw like the number 1 receivers target shares coming down, and it was spread the ball around more in like the 2020 range when we were doing more shotgun spread. Now it's more like we throw to the best players and we run the ball with the best players. Some of these teams only have like 3 players on their offense that touch the ball, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. I was just the 11 targets today for Juwan Johnson were cracking me up. As you're kind of going through that, I mean, this is more of a throwaway note than a bigger picture kind of thing. But maybe that's not true. I thought that the Raiders Patriots was fascinating. Again, is one of these situations where a team you look at like several different teams in concert where a team is doing poor internal evaluation in part because they don't realize or refuse to acknowledge kind of where they are in the building process, and or they refuse to acknowledge the weaknesses that they have, and that the things that they want to address with personnel moves are their fault in a way that you can't address by going out and getting someone else's player who's been propped up by playing around good players. So, I mean, the Seahawks could have easily won today. You know, if you don't get the JSN fumble, certainly they could have lost by a lot more if the 49ers kicker situation wasn't tragic. I mean, it's so bad that you feel bad for the people involved because it's such a public humiliation kind of situation at this point. But I mean, you watch the Raiders and Patriots, and the arm talent from Geno Smith is just so clearly evident. And you think about Chip Kelly, and yeah, he's got some quirks, and yeah, he's probably not the perfect coach, but some of the things that he does well. And you have Geno Smith going 24 for 34 for 362 yards and a touchdown in a situation where they did try and use Genty, and he was completely bottled up, looked terrible. That you can understand in some cases why some of the teams didn't use their rookie backs, because some of the rookie backs who did play looked incredibly tentative. On the other side of the ball, I mean, TreVeyon 5 for 27 carrying it. He does catch 6 passes for 24 yards, so he gets the targets that we talked about. But for someone who was one of the most electric college players of all time and then had a very good camp by all accounts, he seemed to not understand the objective today. It's like, when you have the ball, like, run toward the end zone. I mean, there was a real deer in the headlights look from him.
Okay, but he did have 5+ yards per carry, and Ramondre Stevenson had 2.1 or something like that. So hopefully we get more than 5 carries the next time out or in the future.
Yeah. I mean, neither guy went out of their way to really grab hold of that backfield. The Patriots did throw 46 times. But you have this Geno Smith game, and granted, Brock Bowers is maybe the best football player in the NFL right now, and the damage that he's able to do to teams is going to be significant. But the rest of the guys are like Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers, very solid player, you know, very good starter. You would really like to have him as a starter in your receiver rotation.
The rest of the guys are like Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers, very good player.
Trey Tucker. Every time someone would draft Trey Tucker in my fantasy leagues, I'd be just like, I love that we live in a world that there are people more optimistic than I am. Because what type of optimism do you have to have about the world that you would draft Trey Tucker? 254 and a touchdown. And I'm for as that game's going along, I'm thinking, man, those Trey Tucker drafters right now are sitting back being like, see, we knew this was going to happen. You have Dante Thornton, who basically had as many yards today, just 45, but as many as he had in his entire college career. So he's taking a step forward. You have Michael Mayer looking pretty good. But again, Geno Smith, 362 yards on a day where going over 150 was very, very impressive. And then you have the Seattle Seahawks, who thought that
before
they
you
could trade
pivot,
him.
how mad were you about Mike Vrabel lining up to go for it on 4th and 5 from the 49, and then they get a false start, and there's 5 minutes left and they're down 10 points. And I think he just got mad at his team and was like, you guys false started and now I'm going to punish you. And then he sent the punter out with 5 minutes left and punted the ball to a team winning by 2 possessions. And they only got 1 more possession, and they kicked a field goal, tried an onside kick, didn't get it, lost the game. You just gave up the game on 4. You had 4th and 10. It wasn't 4th and 35. It went from 4th and 5 to 4th and 10. He's right around midfield with 5 minutes left. You need 2 scores. And he punted. It was
Ben,
like the worst.
I've told you a little bit about my high school basketball experience where we had this super terrible, old, incredibly abusive head coach. And it was a nightmare for 4 years. But one of the things that did kind of crack me up over there on the sidelines where this terrible and terrorizing human being is patrolling. And we also were not good most of the time. And so the other team would go on these runs against us and be getting routed. And the assistant coach was also the head soccer coach. So someone who was a viable adult and kind of understands that sports are going on here. And so these runs would happen, and he kind of nudged him. He's like, call timeout. And he would turn to him, he's like, it's too late. They've already blown it. And that was exactly what Mike Vrabel was doing today. He's like, it's too late. They've blown it. Like, we're going to punt and punish everybody. Exactly like you're saying. It just was a little temper tantrum there.
He threw a temper tantrum. He threw a temper tantrum about a false start and lost the game in his coaching debut for a team. It was insane. Anyway, what were you saying about the Seahawks? I wanted to hear where you're going with that.
So the Seahawks then, by contrast, have Sam Darnold out there who, to his credit, didn't look terrible, right? He did kind of manage the game in the way that they, I think, want. But the lack of arm talent, the lack of overall explosiveness on this offense, the lack of being able to manage some of the things that Geno actually managed, which is, dealing with the difficult blocking situation. The Seahawks will probably get better and move on. Zach Charbonnet looked very good getting downhill. And so you can kind of see the beginnings of what they want to be offensively. But one of the problems with getting to where they want to be is that they voluntarily took a big downgrade at the QB position. And now being mediocre is the best possible case until you address this foundational position. And maybe it's just a matter of waiting for Jalen Milroe, right? Jalen Milroe.
But he didn't look good in the preseason. I don't know.
No, he did not, right? And he's probably not ready. But he also is the kind of player where it's he actually does the things that you need to do in contemporary football. And so maybe that would work. Darnold today, 16 for 23, 150 yards, 6.5 yards per attempt, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 sack. It's just merely a situation of the Seahawks kind of play this game from the perspective of let's just get it over. Right now, you do get some good performances from Charbonnet and you get the big game from JSN. It seems like JSN, even in a bad offense, is probably going to have a big year. They don't have anybody else who can draw anything. But Sam Darnold, you have to do better with internal evaluation so you understand that Geno Smith was not your problem, and you have to do better with external evaluation to understand that Sam Darnold just spent the last year throwing to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in a dome. Right. So I'm not saying they don't know any of those things, and there were contract issues and other things like that where they're we can move something around here, bring a guy in here, we can add Jalen Miller, we can do all of these things. But even with those, that additional context added, and I don't want to pretend that context doesn't matter because it did play a key role in the decision. It's still something where you're not actually building your team forward because of what you've done.
Yeah. No, this is what I've more or less been saying since free agency is I wrote a big free agency recap at Stealing Signals, and one of the big sections was I don't like what the Seahawks have done. And, kind of been talking about it. I liked what they did in the draft much more, and so got a little bit more into them. But the way that you described the way that they played, it was the Niners too, but the Niners you can understand a little bit more. They're playing on the road. Their whole team is hurt. They just want to get Christian McCaffrey through this game. Juwan Jennings basically didn't practice the whole offseason, all of these things. So for them to want to just kind of get through this game and try to win at 17-13 like they did actually makes a lot of sense to me. But I wrote that. Yeah, both these teams tried to win this game, running the ball, playing defense. I wrote that it led to a pretty boring box score overall. And that's sort of the way that the whole game felt. The Niners are just throwing to Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey has 31 touches in a game where people were freaking out so much that I saw some drafts from Vegas in that last week, draft boards where he went 2-11 in the main event, and people are stacking Gibbs with Christian McCaffrey. And you're like, man, that's, if McCaffrey plays, that's going to be a really tough team to beat. He goes out and has 22 carries in this game and catches 9 passes. And he's not super explosive and doesn't find a lot of room to run or do anything because they're not really pushing the ball downfield particularly well either. Even their game-winning touchdown pass is sort of just Brock Purdy chucking it up there and letting Jake Tonjes go make a play on the ball, and it worked. But both of these teams are pretty much just trying to get through this game, as you said. The Seahawks, I think, can probably play some pretty good defense, but it seems clear to me that that's how they want to get through this season is defense and, running the ball, old school football, winning low scoring games. Their games are not going to be super fun for fantasy. That's been kind of the concern. I thought that the run game stuff could be more exciting than it was here, which is a little bit disheartening because I think the Niners, they've had some concerns about their rush D and those things. And so not great to see both of the running backs kind of struggle. JSN looked like the only player on the offense that was at all good. And there's so many things that you miss in week one. So I do try to like, fixate or focus or try to not gloss over the things that, our particular type of, it's easy to do. Like our particular type of approach had us out on Cooper Kupp. And I know a lot of people that wanted to do Cooper Kupp, and it was just like, we're not drafting Cooper Kupp. Like you can't play him this year. There's a guy that we didn't even talk about when we were talking about like the Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs and those guys. And for example, Deebo Samuel looked really good today. Looked really good in the Washington Commanders offense. But I was going to say,
disagree there, but I don't want to interrupt what you're.
I knew you were going to. There's no doubt in my mind when we got on here, you're going to tell me that Deebo looked worse than he actually did. But what I was going to say is, even though he looked good, it's not the end of like it doesn't matter that we don't have a lot of exposure to him, because you have to stand for something. It's that it's your Big Lebowski quote, right? Like say what you want. At least it's an ethos, right? Like
I thought you were going to bring some country song in it. I mean,
you got to stand for something, or you're going to fall for everything or whatever. No, I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you're playing Deebo, you're playing Diggs, and I'm glad we don't have Diggs. That whole conversation was so hilarious because we didn't draft either of those guys on a single team together. I have one home league share of Stephon Diggs that I was bag defending. One time I drafted him this year, and I was like, kind of like, yeah, no, he's worth drafting. But I don't believe that. I didn't stand behind that on any other league, but I didn't draft any Kupp anywhere. Drafted, a little bit of best ball Deebo, but very, very little Deebo. No Keenan Allen whatsoever. And it's a whole group of players that there may be like small wins there, but there are big missed potential. And I'm not saying that Kupp's not going to come back and have some production in the future either. But the point is, what we saw in this game really drives home that when, like, it's that question of what do you get when you are right? If Kupp's right, he's not going to massively gap JSN. It's just probably not very good for the Seahawks offense. If JSN's right, it's what you saw. 13 targets, 9 catches, 124 yards, and Cooper Kupp goes 3-2-15. Does absolutely nothing. He got an end zone target. He could have had a TD. Drew a DPI in the end zone. Even
the depth of the targets for JSN were huge too. He had another play where only an extraordinary defensive strip at the end kept that from being another 40-yard game. I mean, in a game where the Seahawks basically didn't move the ball at all, JSN should have been over 150 and could have threatened like 200.
Yeah, he was incredible. But go ahead, do your gaslighting on Deebo Samuel. I was watching that and I was like, Sean's going to tell me this is not what I'm seeing. I thought he looked.
You were the person.
Like a perfect fit with that.
You were the person sending me all of these links about Deebo Samuel and the weight issues. Yeah. And if he didn't look exactly like that today, the thing with Washington, and this counts, right? So anybody who's like, I understood the situation mattered. So don't be like, oh, it's just the situation. If Jaden Daniels were not so extraordinary and if Terry McLaurin hadn't held out the entire offseason, I mean, this team that they have around Jaden Daniels right now is terrible.
It's bad.
It's very terrible. I mean, it's really frustrating when you consider how good he is and what the fantasy upside for him is going to be. Now, he had, just a day where within the context of, 2025 is still, fine because he has the 68 rushing yards and, 233 and a touchdown, you're doing fine. It could have been a huge game, in part because he had a couple opportunities at Deebo, where Deebo again demonstrated that I'm a very big skeptic of some of the catch score stuff, and a lot of those things bounce around pretty consistently in a way where if you fade that and you take the player who gets open constantly and runs after the catch really well and has all of this dynamism, then the chance that the catch rate stuff or the catch ability doesn't matter in a season and you get a huge ADP crushing result is just so good to you. And yet watching Deebo Samuel today, I'm like, that dude's stone hands are unbelievable. He was 7 for 77 on 10 targets. 2 of them were bad drops where he could have gone for 150 yards in this game. And he looked slow, right? But I do want to say that the touchdown play was an excellent play. where
you.
you get the full extension and almost everybody else goes down in that situation. I mean, I say goes down, doesn't get the ball across the line, gets the knee down first. That was a really cool
he's
play.
He's pretty good with the ball in his hands. A lot of the 7 for 77 was short catches, and he did catch like 2 down the field where I was like, see, Sean, he can catch down the field, but you're right, he had some drops too. But it's like it's possible for him to catch the
He
ball
always
down
looks
the field.
surprised again when he's one of these guys where the ball bounces off his hands. He's like, gosh darn, I was supposed to remind myself, like when the ball hits the hands, you like grab around it. But yeah,
no, you're totally right about the Commanders. That offense, I mean, like there's moments today where I was like, man, Zach Ertz is their best skill player.
Now the touchdown catch that he had was a heck of a catch, right? And we gave him a hard time. That was a fantastic catch.
Yeah. It's like if Zach Ertz looks like your most talented player when he's been looked washed up like 5 years ago, it's probably like you didn't build a very good skill position group. Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt looked great. 10 for 82 and a TD. The TD was a nice little sidestep into space. The 42-yard run that he had late was very nice. Eckler got the start, played most of the first 2 drives, but then wasn't out there a lot. I actually had a note to check if he maybe had an injury, and right after I wrote that note, he was back out there and had a very physical run, bouncing off tackles, and I was like, they used him as the main dude in the early part of the game. The reason I had that note is they were starting to use Jeremy McNichols a little bit, who my understanding of why he would be the guy that was active instead of Chris Rodriguez is that McNichols is a core special teamer, but that, once Chris Rodriguez was inactive, that it was going to be pretty positive for JCM. And anyway, they did use a little McNichols. They did use, obviously, Eckler a lot early, but the point that I'm trying to drive home is that Eckler was not ultimately the featured guy, even though he played the vast majority of the first 2 drives and will be the receiver out of the backfield. He gets 3 targets. JCM gets 1, but Eckler only 6 carries. JCM gets 10. McNichols got 4. So there's 20 running back carries. JCM gets half of them, gets 10.
So do you feel like you were wrong about saying that was too early to take him when he has this type of game and looks very fast, despite the fact that this was one of those pure week 1 troll jobs where the Commanders get rid of Brian Robinson and then their other viable running back they make inactive before the game starts. And yet when the game starts, we're treated to a heavy dose of Austin Eckler. And it's only, by the way, down the line that JCM gets out there and is just breaking off explosive play after explosive. It's like, did any of these teams want to go? Like, how confident were you that you were playing? I mean, you're probably 100% confident that you were playing in a game against Russell Wilson because he was the announced starter of their team. But when you're playing in a football game where Russell Wilson is the opposing starter and you have Jaden Daniels, you're not even like bothered with who you throw out there. You're like, we've been talking about JCM as the greatest player on earth since the first day of practice, and we didn't even bother to play him through most of this game because the disparity in quarterbacks was so great.
Well, to answer your question, I mean, I think he was so good in this game that he has to get more work going forward, which is exciting. But the hesitance that I had on him was about the ceiling. And I wrote, and I'm going to write in signals, I still think it's a pretty big question. I'm a little bit concerned because the way that they also use McNichols, like they're going to use Eckler. Even if Eckler gets hurt, I think they're going to use McNichols in the pass game. JCM's going to catch passes. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of overall running back targets in this offense. There wasn't last year. Jaden Daniels is going to throw to his receivers or run, and he throws to his receivers short. That's part of the reason that the running backs are not a part of it. The whole design of the offense, right? Like the fact that Debo got 10 targets. We see Jalen Lane get a couple in today's game. The Zach Ertz throws are also short throws. The short, quick game stuff basically doesn't go to the running backs because it goes to the receivers and potentially Ertz in this offense. And so the upside really has to be rushing efficiency. Now, there's a lot of guys that have been able to get there on that. We saw sort of the rise of the trap back last year. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, these guys that, I mean, they've had great seasons in their careers before. Saquon used to catch the ball a ton too. But these guys in these offenses with the mobile QBs where they're not catching a lot of balls, the efficiency that they're afforded, both because they're talented and because of the mobile QBs in the run game, it has been enough in recent, really 2024. When I say recent seasons, I mean, I can see scenarios where JCM hits in those kinds of ways, obviously not to the same degree of, borderline.
Are you a little scared right now that just the standard for scoring out of that draft slot is going to be depressingly low. Well, I'm thinking about it in the context of, I don't want to make this like sort of a dogmatic thing. It's not about like, is the dead zone exist or doesn't exist? Like, are people right or wrong about that? Those types of things. It's a question of like, what types of profiles and what areas of the draft can you play? And, one of the things that we said about this season is that it really looks like there are a lot of guys that people are going to try and play that don't have the combination of talent and opportunity right now. One of the guys you think about, a James Conner, for example, it's like, yes, he's better than Trey Benson, probably. And the team also seems to think that, probably. Although, as you mentioned, the Cardinals, among many other teams, are just going to lie to you about what they plan to do because, there's occasionally some value in keeping some information to yourself. Trey Benson looked better today. There was a situation out there where, again, neither of those guys potentially could score. This was exactly what I feared about Tyrone Tracy. And it's certainly not saying that, we're right in any way, shape, or form about Scatterboo, because at this point, structurally, the Giants are just in a cataclysmic situation. But with Tracy, you get 10 for 24. You have 2 receptions on 5 targets. He also fumbled one of those that was ruled incomplete. Yeah. So everything that we've been concerned about with his profile was very much on display today. You don't get a ton from Scatterboo. You did get a couple of fun highlights where he
only touched the ball 4 times and he trucked 4 dudes in 4 touches.
I think the skeptics would fairly say that he also rushed for -3 yards.
It's a pretty good counter. It's a pretty good counter. But they played him in the green zone. They played him at the goal line. Yeah, he didn't get going anywhere. He didn't score any touchdowns or anything.
On his goal line carry, between him and his teammates, it looked more like the goal was to tunnel to the center of the earth.
He ran into his fullback. Yeah, that wasn't great.
Oh, dude. So he had the 2 carries for -3 yards. On one of them, he just dove directly down, to China. On the other one, maybe these are the same. Maybe this all happened in the same play, but it was the hardest hit from your own player that I've ever seen a running back take. Where that guy got befuddled because he's out there playing NFL football and other gigantic human beings are hitting you, and you get turned around. He gets turned around and is blocking and just crushes. It wasn't as hard as the hit that Travis Kelce laid on Xavier Worthy, but it was in the same general ballpark.
Oh my gosh. Week 1. The catch that Scatterboo had on the sideline, I think it was his first touch. He gets a guy bearing down on him and he just lowers his shoulder and the guy just bounces off of him out of bounds. And then the next defender hits him and doesn't take him down. But he only got 2 yards on the play. But it was still 2 evaded tackles in 2 yards. And the third guy got him. It was, he's not a fun guy to tackle. We see guys break tackles. My note on what little we saw from Scatterboo was this was irregular. From if you watch a ton of football, the stuff that he did in just a few touches was irregular. It was as advertised that he's a really tough dude to tackle. Very Mike Allstott for the fellow olds out there. Very this dude is a hammer. He's gonna run you over.
As we were watching the games today, and I always sort of joke about my sister being the best fantasy football player in the family, which is just straightforward, not a joke. When I explained as we were watching the Giants that Cam Scatterboo was the guy that we had a lot of, she's like, the fullback.
The fullback. The white dude. Amazing. Oh, what else do we got to talk about, Sean? We haven't talked about Fannon. He looked incredible. The Browns were so fun. We get Dylan Sampson catching a bunch of balls, which was kind of nice. You were completely right on the Jerome Ford thing. They just don't like giving that guy the ball. He was out there a lot, but they're like, when he's out there, we don't throw to the running backs. When Sampson's out there, we throw to the running backs. It was just very straightforward. And Sampson has 8 targets in this game. Ford has 1. That's why when I look at the targets per out run stuff at the end of the year in that Field Tipper series, I often talk about the discrepancies in targets per out between the backs because it shows you which player the team was trying to get the ball in his hands with intent. And that's what we saw today with Dylan Sampson, which was a great sign. Very, very positive. I'll be calling that signal for those Ceiling Signals readers out there. But the other guy they're trying to get the ball in the hands of has a catch in the first drive, has catches basically throughout the whole game, gets a handoff in this game. Harold Fannon leads the team with 9 targets. Sampson had 8, Judy had 8, Tillman had 8. They were all in that same range. Njoku had 6. But Shawn, we were talking about Fannon and Njoku and maybe playing different roles, and I was adamant this offseason. Those guys are going to play different roles. They're both going to be out there a lot. Fannon doesn't really impact Njoku. Njoku's probably fine. I'm wrong, but not because it's a different tight end, because everything I said about them playing different roles is right. It's just that from a pure target share perspective, if you have a guy earning as many targets as it looks like Harold Fannon's going to earn, it becomes a lot harder for the ancillary pieces, which Njoku looks like he is. I'm like, already your slot receiver, as it were, Harold Fannon, is earning 9 targets, and Njoku's still on 6. They combine for 15. It's not like they both can't coexist, but their degree of coexisting is problematic for Njoku because Fannon looks like he's the same dude he was in college, where he led the NCAA with 105 catches. This guy's going to see a lot of volume. The play where Flacco is rolling right, and it takes 9 hours because it's Joe Flacco rolling out. But he's looking for somebody to dump it too short. He can't find the running back. He can't find the receiver. He's looking back over. Fannon's on the sideline. He's in the flat. He's the only one who goes and does something and work. They always talk about this, right? Who's the guy that's working to get open and find his quarterback? In this case, it wasn't to work back to his quarterback. It was to work downfield. And Flacco's right before he gets to the sideline, sees him breaking up the sideline, throws it. Now the defender's chasing him back turn, throws it right over the back, over the back turned defender, right over his shoulder. Fannon makes a nice catch to get like a 15-yard gain on a scramble drill play between, a 40-yard quarterback and a 40-year-old quarterback and this 21-year-old rookie, right? But Flacco already sees that this guy has a sense for how to get open and how to find space and draw volume, which that's why we look at productive players in college. That's what's there, right?
Well, and he was drafted earlier, I think, than perception, for whatever it indicates. That's one of the reasons why, even as he started rising, we're like, we drafted him every league in the 18th round. We're still going to draft him every league in the 13th round, especially if the zero RB candidate guys have now started going in the 11th, so they're not blocking that pick. And this game had positives and negatives. For all the Jerry Jeudy skeptics, he played really poorly in this game. Didn't get open early and had 2 really bad drops that impacted the outcome.
One became an interception.
You also had a situation where Cedric Tillman was a little bit more involved than certainly you want if you're playing a lot of Judy and Njoku. Now, he also dropped a pass that was basically a lateral for an interception. And so that could, hurt him as well. You have a situation with Njoku where he's just not a route runner, right? He's one of these guys where you throw 2-yard passes to him and then he's a physical athlete and he takes the ball and runs. But that's where Fannon probably, I think you look at a lot of these things and so much of week 1 is not going to hold up. And one of the things that we've talked about recently, and it sounds like, and I think to a certain extent, it's a fair criticism that in some ways we're just kind of couching week 1 in a way that benefits us because we're saying like our takes don't have to play out in week 1, but other people's do. But there is this element where the veteran takes, you actually do need to start to see some evidence of it because those guys have to win. Or like Tyrone Tracy, one of the issues for him is that he actually needs to win week 1 to stay ahead of the guy who's behind him. And when you have a terrible week 1, that's a problem. The huge game from someone like a Harold Fannon is probably not a genie that's going to go back in the bottle just for so many reasons, including the relatively poor play of teammates. And you're going to see a ton of passes. Now, maybe when Judkins gets in there was reporting that, he may even play a decent amount in week 2. You had I think the most frustrating thing from our perspective in this game is that Rocket Sanders goes in there and takes the touchdown. And certainly Judkins is going to have those. You got both the good and the bad from Dylan Sampson in this game, where he's just very, very athletic and very explosive. And he looked so good getting to the edge on the receptions, doing, different pieces that, those are high value running back touches. Just the receptions from him today get him 14.5 points, which is going to beat a huge number of people who were drafted early, right? He also had like 3 plays where NFL defenders picked him up and just tossed him.
Yeah.
Which,
12
that's
for
also
29 rushing is not going to help
no.
when Judkins is back.
Right. So, yeah, you get interesting things from them. This Panthers game, then
was Bryce Young the closest quarterback to Russ Wilson in terms of how bad? Spencer Rattler played better than Bryce Young today. I don't think Spencer Rattler played well, to be clear. Like, he was not very good. As far as going into it, my expectations for Spencer Rattler was that he's the clear 32nd best quarterback out of 32 starters today. I was mildly not like, I didn't puke watching him. Russell Wilson was 32nd in the NFL. Bryce Young was terrible today. I mean, he was bad.
He was bad, but some of the things that you had said to me that got me off of them a little bit as we kind of went through draft season, the plotting nature of it. I mean, this is a team in a winnable game because frustratingly, Trevor Lawrence just looked awful again. And I think enthusiasm for Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter has to be, somewhat damped down by Trevor Lawrence throws with the least touch of any guy who was a supposed generational prospect and has otherwise elite arm talent, but just everything is a scud missile. And the decision making is poor. So if you throw without any touch and without decision making, if you're not seeing the field, if you're not reading properly, just having a big arm and being willing to get rid of the ball. I mean, Trevor Lawrence does a couple things that are very, very helpful, which is that he does get rid of the ball and he has a huge arm. I mean, we had plenty of guys today who didn't get rid of the ball, and then you're like, it's just everything about that plus a sack.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean,
something you told me on Lawrence once was that he has this weird thing where he can only throw to he can't throw to the good players on his team. I'm pretty sure you told me. So he looked fine throwing, how he used to be really good at throwing to Jamal Agnew and Parker Washington and stuff. He looked fine throwing the ball to Brenton Strange today at some tight end targets, and he looked fine throwing to De'Ami Brown for whatever reason. But every time he's trying to go to Brian Thomas or Travis Hunter, it's he freaks out. He's like, I have to get the ball to this player, and he can't throw to the good players. It's so bizarre.
So Brian Thomas gets the rushing touchdown to vaguely save his day. I mean, Travis Hunter kind of already looks like a bust. I say that from the perspective of what they traded for him, where you've got to be great on both sides. He doesn't play much defense today. It's going to be tough to get all of that going. I'm not saying he can't do it, but I mean, the only thing that was exciting about Jacksonville today was Cam Little. Now, for those of us who have always loved Travis Etienne, but don't really have any shares of him now, it was bittersweet watching him break off those big runs because Travis Etienne is pretty funny. He was describing his little brother and giving him all this praise and talking about how, he's so agile. And, I think he was doing the same comparison I was doing. We're comparing him to James Cook and all those types of things. He's like, we're very different players, even though, we're both kind of smaller. It's like he can beat anybody and he break all these tackles, all these force miss tackles. He's like, I'm fast. And you could see that on some of the plays today from ATN. And I do think that the Liam Cohen effect is going to be good for them. But I want to say that within the context of, Tank Bigsby drafters have to be endlessly infuriated. And thankfully that's not a boat that we're in. But also anybody who likes any of these guys have to look at LaQuint Allen Jr. being on the field in meaningful moments and being like, what is happening to the world? Allen and Woody Marks were guys with such limited prospect profiles where they had forced targets in college, and you look at the peripherals and those guys are not NFL players. And someone as supposedly sharp as Liam Cohen, who made Bucky Irving, and you have this great game from Travis Etienne, but you have Bashal Tutin lurking. And some of it's just, frustrating that Tutin isn't playing more. But already the fact that they don't appear to have Tank Bigsby in the game plan is like vaguely good for Tutin. But the main takeaway I had from this is that I'm not even that worried about Travis Etienne being awesome, because he'll inevitably be traded or get hurt, or you have a timeshare, but you can't have the terrible 7th round pick taking running back receptions. You need those receptions for your key players.
Yep. The LaQuinn Allen stuff was insane. The Tank Bigsby stuff, I'm sorry, I get a decent amount of Schadenfreude out of that. Schadenfreude? I never know how to say that word. I do have ETN, Sean, in one of my home leagues, an auction with my college buddies where a few different people are using my ranks. So I can't get any of the players I want. So I got ETN for $4 and I started him, and I was like, yeah, I showed you guys. I got Travis ETN. So I got some fun out of that. Bryce Young, let's talk about him for a second. McMillan,
and they weren't even getting plays into him so that they could get snaps off. I mean, this was the young version of geriatric Phillip Rivers and Aaron Rodgers, where they act like there's not a clock. I mean, what are Dave Canales and Bryce Young doing? Like, you've had some time to practice. I do think that the Adam Thielen trade, within the context of Jalen Coker getting hurt, actually jacked them up massively.
Yeah.
Because Henner Renfrow, not really the person that even the coaching staff wants, and Xavier Legette cannot play at all. And so you're basically out there in a vaguely similar situation as the Chiefs, where, it's Bryce Young and McMillan, and the other team knows that. And so, especially if McMillan's only going to put one hand up half the time, your quarterback doesn't have anybody to throw to.
So McMillan runs a simple curl route, and Bryce Young misses him by about as much as what I was describing Daniel Jones missed Michael Pittman by earlier. This is in the beginning of the game. A few plays later, Hunter Renfrow runs a wheel route and does win, and the ball needs to be out in front of him, and he underthrows it by 12 yards. It was at least 5 yards underthrown. It was borderline 10 yards. He had to stop and try to come back through the player to catch it. He throws a bad pick in traffic not long after that. Then they have a lightning suspension for this game, and he came out looking a little better after that, and I was like, all right, maybe that was a little helpful. Maybe he just had jitters early on. But, man, he continued to miss throws late in the game. I thought he did have a really nice throw to Legette on a wide-open flag route, perfectly placed on the sideline. And then Legette did the same thing that Jonathan Mingo did a couple years ago, where it's like he was trying to make sure he didn't get both feet in bounds. Mingo had that famous play where he jumped as far as he could to get his feet out of bounds. Intentional. Like, what are you doing?
I was thinking about the commentators, and that was the other one today where the commentators you can't do that.
You got to make sure to drag your feet. Like, definitely drag your feet. Whatever you do.
You don't have to drag your feet, Ben. Just take normal strides.
Just take normal strides. What are you doing? There was a very well thrown ball. The thing that drives me nuts about Young, I'm saying he played so bad, is that I don't think he's going to play as bad as he did in the last couple of, at the beginning of last year and in the rookie season, because you do see the flashes with him. He had a really nice scramble, used his legs well. He had a 22-yard nice scramble, but then also 40 total rushing yards was nice to see. But the good throws with Young are very good, and he's been able to string them together well enough, and he did at times late last year. It's just a little bit maddening because he does have I don't think he's terrible, but I think he played a bad game. And it's a little bit like Trevor Lawrence. It's not much different than Trevor Lawrence in that regard. Trevor Lawrence is arguably worse than Bryce Young. Because we've seen it for longer, and we have not seen the consistent ability to make the high end throws. But yeah, it's just frustrating. It's just frustrating. The inconsistency, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah, you have a game here where the two QBs combine for only one sack, and so from that perspective, they're arguably eliminating some of these negative plays that are hurting some other teams. But the thing that kept popping up to me today, within the context of everything you were talking about earlier in the show about trends, is that the flip side of that is that offenses have become increasingly reluctant to ever take bad plays. If you're not going to take any sacks and you're not going to commit any turnovers, then your offense becomes incredibly vanilla. And it becomes the type of offense that we saw from these two teams where they combine for one total sack. And yet, I mean, I'm not very well calibrated on QBR because that's not a stat that I look at very often. But I feel like Bryce Young's 20 is in the bad range. And
it's 0 to 100. So, yeah, it's not good.
We have 15 first downs for the Panthers, 19 for the Jags.
Yeah, the only fun thing in this box score is Travis Etienne, 16 carries, 143 yards. There's nothing else in this box score.
And there are some elements where last year he was hurt in the second half. We've discussed those. This was a situation where, and it was always kind of interesting in week one because not all of this stuff carries over. And sometimes the coaches that look bad because they couldn't unlock players, you know, a couple of years or a couple of weeks later, they're like, see, I mean, this was a fluky performance. But the thing that you noted today, again, about Cohen and the Jaguars is even with all the trouble that they had passing, they were able to create some plays where Travis Etienne could run forward and use his speed. And that was the most shocking thing about these Doug Peterson offenses, where Peterson kept harping on this idea coming off of Etienne having great numbers and great peripherals, you know, early on in their time together, where he's like, he's got to go to the right hole. And, you know, I did a whole thing writing it up for RotoViz where I'm talking about SIS has him as one of the backs with the highest rate of actually hitting the design gap. And yet the coach's talking point on him is that he's got to do a better job. That disconnect between, again, the internal evaluation, understanding what you're accomplishing with your offense and what your player is good at. And it was encouraging to me today that, like, the Brian Thomas design touchdown, even though you don't get the passing that you want to see, ETN like doing what he's done before, where you're running into areas where you can then show off your speed. You know, some of it, again, I mentioned earlier, the Panthers-Falcons shootout at the end of last year. It can be that the Panthers defense is like that bad, which makes the Trevor Lawrence performance even more disconcerting. But I mean, I'd love to see these offensive performances where, you know, you have new coaches and they seem to understand what their players are good at. So that part with ETN, even though we don't necessarily expect that to hold up, is similar to the thing with the Raiders for me, where, I mean, the Raiders were kind of fun. They're actually not going to be that good. I think when we did our big sort of over-under show on full season results, I was shocked at what the Patriots win projection was and thought that was a super easy under.
If you can't beat the Raiders at home in week one, then you're not getting to 8.5 wins.
And they weren't competitive.
No,
there are a lot of things that they have to do. But one of the things one of the quarterbacks that I have the hardest time with in terms of knowing where I am on it personally and what I think it means for fantasy is Drake May, where I'm not exactly a skeptic because I see someone who's a lot of fun and who is, you know, you have some of these wow moments, both with the legs and with the arm, and the ball comes out quickly. It comes out, you know, with plenty of zip. A lot of throws are on target. He has some mobility, but I do think it's a thing where both the arm talent and the mobility is at least slightly overstated. Our RotoViz rookie guide grades on him were lower than consensus because a lot of the numbers just didn't stack up to the way people talked about him. It was mostly that he was willing to throw deep, which I do think is a positive. And certainly if you can unlock that in the contemporary NFL, that's fine, but it's difficult to do. And he's also, like, he's not Josh Allen, and he's not going to be from a rushing perspective. One of the things with Drake May that really jumped out to me at the end of last year, and a little bit with Penix too, because on both of those guys, when I watched them, I was like, you know, I was probably wrong on these players, not from the perspective of being, you know, way off necessarily, but I do think that they flash more than I was thinking. And I think they're going to be very viable starters, where I had even some skepticism about that going in. But then you look at their numbers at the end of the year and you're like, they're actually not very good. I mean, Drake May's IQR last year, right, which is the SIS QB rating, which has adjustments then for charting purposes, where they're saying, okay, these things actually were the quarterback's fault and these things weren't. I mean, he was lower than Caleb Williams, who was looked at as a massive reclamation project for the Chicago Bears. He was right down there with Daniel Jones and just above the guys who were tragic. Now, he was playing for a coaching staff that was justifiably fired because they were massively overwhelmed in terms of doing their element. And he was playing with very poor players around him.
Very bad players.
And so all of that is going to come into play. But the thing that was interesting about it was that his quarterback rating actually went down with the charting adjustments, which is not something you would necessarily expect. And I don't think something that you can guarantee is well calibrated, right? It could be something where SIS is actually making errors in how they're looking at that. But I mean, you look at this game today, and I think that we should note one of the people that, you know, we had put in our free agent pickups for basically for Keandre Lambert Smith, and then maybe a few other guys that were take a peek players who didn't pan out, was Keyshawn Boutte. And I don't exactly expect his stuff to hold up. At the same time, because they were getting the ball out quickly, and he was, you know, getting open there. I mean, the 6 for 103 for him with the 8 targets. I mean, Hunter Henry also draws 8 targets. Stephon Diggs really not involved, but then as the game goes along, works into it a lot more, draws 7 targets.
Hey, he didn't look healthy. Right, there's all this talk that he was fully healthy with the ACL and stuff. To me, I felt like Diggs didn't look right yet, which, I mean, or just old, whatever. But,
so as we're talking about the stuff here tonight without tons of additional like deep info on things like routes, my impression of it was that he was on the sidelines a lot. Was that the case, especially like in the first half?
That was my read for sure. He wasn't coming out there a lot.
And so he still draws 7 targets without a full route share. He could end up being pretty high, especially if they try to run the ball through Ramondre Stevenson, you know, behind this offensive line. The 7 for 15 is tough. It's tough. And it's still a thing where, I mean, I was making the case that they had some decent depth. Kyle Williams not really involved. I do think that Chisholm will be active in the future and will play a bigger role. They need him out there. What was your thought on the Patriots and the receiving group, specifically Keyshawn Boutte, after when he has this game after drawing a lot of enthusiasm from camp, where people were like, oh, this is a completely different guy. And we even think back to LSU, right, where there were time periods there where he was a pretty shiny prospect, and then that kind of all went away at the end.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of the reason that, like, I think so. He was part of the reason that, like, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas weren't, like, immediate producers as freshmen. He was an older player, but was viewed as the, you know, the lead and stayed ahead of them early on. Yeah, I saw that you had added him to some of those waiver bids, and I had a guillotine situation that on team I'm, you know, running solo where it's pretty thin in guillotine. So you have 18 teams, and I had thrown a bit on him as well. I did think he was intriguing, and so when I saw you had thrown him in there some, I thought that was pretty interesting. And then watching it, I was certainly like, Shawn knows what he's doing. Like, this is a good call. I thought he looked like they're number one. And I thought it was not close. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that thought Demario Douglas was going to do a ton, and he catches a touchdown in this game. 7 targets, 2 catches, -2 yards, 1 touchdown for Demario Douglas. His other catch was like a big loss. And then didn't catch a lot of the other targets.
7 targets, only the 2 catches. I don't remember all 7 of those targets. I do remember a bad drop.
Yeah, he's not the player. I think everyone thinks he's just going to be the next in a long line of like good slot receivers there, like the next Jacoby Myers and stuff. The reason I wasn't into him, I mean, you know that I was really into Jacoby Myers those early years. A lot of it comes down to me, especially with these routes limited slot receivers. Do you consistently earn the volume when you're actually out there? And Myers did repeatedly. Demario Douglas's targets per out from year 1 to year 2 went down precipitously. It was like 23%, went down to like 19%. You can't be at 19% as a low ADOT route limited slot receiver. You need to be 23, 24, 25% targets per route. That's when you can actually accumulate enough targets overall. And so I was pretty out on him from the field tipper stuff in the early offseason, looking at the targets per route and just talking through how his season went. And there wasn't a ton of efficiency or anything super exciting in that profile for him going into year 3. I think he's a really tough one. I knew there's a lot of people that were really in on him, and I guess I never totally understood that and had him ranked pretty low and was getting some questions about that. But not trying to just victory lap because he had one bad game. He could go on to have a great game. He has a touchdown in this game. He could go on to have a great season. But I don't think the main point is, as far as how is this all going to shake out, I don't think he's going to be a massive factor. I think that's where, as you mentioned, Chisholm could just take some of those slot routes over time. They used Mac Hollins way too much. They ended up throwing vertically to him on a 4th down. And I think he drew a penalty, but it was just like a really bizarre, like 4th and short, where they throw well downfield to Mac Hollins in like a contested situation. And it's like, this is the worst play call I've ever seen. I get being creative and like doing something that the defense isn't assuming. And so you throw the ball on 4th and short, but like you don't throw 30 yards downfield to Mac Hollins. Like go with a contested catch. Like that's not something that you do. You still need like some degree of success rate on the play, like a short throw to some, area of the field that the defense isn't really paying attention to might make sense, but not bombing it deep to Mac Hollins. Kyle Williams, the camp stuff was all very weird on him. He gets 1 target in this game. I thought, he looked fine catching that pass on the sideline. To me, the storyline for New England was that they clearly already know that TreVeyon Henderson is their best player. They were trying to get the ball in his hands as much as they could in the passing game. I was surprised that earlier you were like a little bit down. He didn't get into space and have any kind of explosive play or anything, but I felt like it was a really bullish day for TreVeyon Henderson. They threw to him 6 times.
So you're not concerned about. You're not concerned. You're pretty enthused. I mean, my thesis with him is that he's going to lead the running back position in receptions, in part because of the way Josh McDaniels wants to run this, and in part because they don't have. I mean, I feel like I'm saying contradictory things about the receiving core, but within the context of where they are, he's got to catch a ton of passes. But it was the thing, and again, a rookie's first game compared to a superstar veteran. But one of the things with TreVeyon is that, he's played a ton of football. The Ohio State football is a high level. He's made all these. As soon as the Detroit Lions game started, and you're watching Jahmyr Gibbs, and now Jahmyr Gibbs, most of the times he touched the ball today, it was him, and there were 11 yellow
7
jerseys around him.
defenders. Yeah,
but even with that, he just blew your mind with the speed that he executed things. And Henderson looked sluggish. I think the context will be fine. But
I wanted to ask you, what's your concern? Is that what it is, that you just felt like he didn't look explosive enough?
Yeah. You can have a variety of concerns in week 1, especially with young players, because you know that you have a very wide range of outcomes. And if you bet on them heavily, certainly you're doing that with eyes wide open, knowing there are risks and knowing that both you yourself and subscribers, listeners are going to be frustrated if the player ends up being toward the bottom end of it, because the bottom end of it for an unproven rookie is just very, very bad. So I don't think there's any concern of that with Henderson. He's going to be good. He's going to score a lot of points. He's going to have a ton of the receptions. That's hugely helpful. And Ramondre Stevenson being this bad, and he was out there a ton. Henderson actually touched the ball on a very large percentage of the plays he was in the game. And you could say that is also a huge positive. The Broncos one with Harvey, where he's not out there either, you're just like, what is possibly happening? But then he breaks that run, and you're like, yes, this is the thesis. And Henderson, RJ Harvey is so far and away better. And it was great to see you and I have a bunch of Dobbins as well.
Great to see him score a touchdown late, because he was doing nothing at that point.
When Tyler Bidet was out there early in that game, that might have been the one time today where I thought my head was going to melt. But
so I think the reason is that he didn't want to tip the run pass stuff, and I think it had to have been because of pass blocking, that you're just kind of holding back a smile. But he was doing the Dobbins thing where he was playing him on all the downs, and then he brought in Bidet for some passing downs, and I was like, is he this? Because then he brought in Harvey on 1st and 10 the next drive and gave him the carry when there's like a clear run, and then he took him off the field right away for second down. And he would only bring him in for like the rush downs. So he's got Harvey into this role where he's like he doesn't trust him on the pass downs.
My concern with Harvey is that he's going to lead the running back position in scoring during the fantasy playoffs for a bunch of teams that are not in the fantasy playoffs.
Okay, but going back to Henderson, the Harvey thing it's maddening. Sean Payton is maddening. The rotations are maddening today. I'm scared to look at the routes, Sean, when we get all the data, because I thought Franklin looked good. I was excited to see him catch some early balls, and Mims did some stuff, and I was like, man, yeah, I mean, Mims is good at football, man, but Sean Payton is just maddening. But the Henderson thing, I wanted to say, your concern is that he's like somewhat sluggish, or looked somewhat sluggish. Not that he is, because obviously you have been very high on the actual skill. I wouldn't necessarily refute that he didn't look good today. The reason I'm so bullish and optimistic is all of the context together, which is that it seemed like in this game, it was very clear that when he was on the field, they wanted to get the ball in his hands. They wanted to feature him. They thought that their path to a successful offense was like, we got to get TreVeyon going. When they started to struggle, they would put him in on the next drive, it felt like to me. And it was like, okay, we're going to get him touches right away and try and build something. And it didn't build. But
I mean, they scored 13 points. They were in struggle mode the whole game.
The whole game. But he was better than Ramondre. And, Demario Douglas didn't do anything. Kayshon Boutte has a nice game. Hunter Henry was like fine. He caught 4 of his 8 targets. Diggs, I mentioned, looked like sluggish, and they weren't playing him a lot. Like, the reason I said I think that he wasn't really healthy is because of the route stuff. I had the same take as you. We'll have to see the numbers, but it seemed like he wasn't out there a ton. And then when he was out there, he didn't necessarily look great either. It's a cream rises to the top situation to me, right? Where like they already feel like he's the cream. They're going to make sure to get him the ball. I don't know how he can play himself out of that situation. His situation is different than RJ Harvey's from the perspective that he's already the number one skill player in his coaching staff's eyes. And from what I could see today, like they're like only way we can do anything offensively is if we just get the ball to TreVeyon, Henderson, or I guess punt, because they thought that punting was how they could win this game as well.
It's too late, Ben. They've already ruined it.
It's already we're screwed. We've already lost. Were you interested in Marvin Harrison at all today? I mean, the missed target on the potential big play, but they did connect on a long catch. They did do some of the shorter ADOT stuff. He catches a short touchdown. I mean, obviously, Trey McBride looked completely unstoppable and like the best player in the world. And I felt the same way. I was like, Sean, I decided while watching this game, I'm getting a Trey McBride jersey. I haven't gotten a jersey in several years. I'm not a big jersey guy, but I was like, this dude's my favorite player in the NFL. I don't know. I have a ton of Brock Bowers this year, way more than Trey McBride. I still have a lot, and I have a lot of Trey McBride in Dynasty in those places. But, I mean, he's my favorite player in the NFL. He's so fun to watch.
He's always walking around out there too, like he's an alien, right? I mean, like his body is built like slightly differently, like a straightforward superhero. I thought the Harrison looked good. There were some drafts late in draft season where, I mean, he was the pretty clear pick, and I felt like I should have made that pick. But my skepticism about both Kyler Murray and Harrison's specific skill set. We've talked a lot about Rashee Rice and how potentially the Chiefs are one of the few teams he would be a star for. We got to wait and see how all that materializes. Harrison for me is in the exact polar opposite situation where I think the Cardinals are one of the only teams that he would not be a star for. In part because he is a little bit more limited than other star receivers. He's a guy who can get open at intermediate and deep levels, and you can throw the ball up there to him, and he's going to catch a big chunk of those. And it's such a massive reality football weapon. And on a viable team, it would be a huge fantasy weapon as well. Maybe he's so big. And the rest of their guys, one of the reasons that I feel like I should have drafted some Marvin Harrison is that they have absolutely nothing beyond him and Trey McBride. And so even if you're skeptical about the relationship of McBride to Harrison, And even if you're skeptical like Kyler Murray, the fact that their other receivers are Michael Wilson, who goes 1 for 5 yards on his 4 targets today. Zay Jones had 1 target. Elijah Higgins had a couple targets out of the tight end position. Greg Dortch is one of the unfortunate players with our buddy Cam Scattaboo to have a negative in the box score where he has 1 catch for -2. I mean, they have nothing. And so, I mean, in a game like this where that 1 terrible pass ends up being the only missed connection, in some ways, I think this is an upside outcome for him. It's a very good score, so having it be an upside outcome is not a problem. I just don't think that you're going to get the massive games and the massive step forward from Marvin Harrison in this offense, where when you do things well like he did, and the biggest play that you were going to have, your quarterback can't hit you.
Right.
I mean, maybe the Cardinals actually get beaten pretty soundly in a lot of their games. Because again, I mean, this is a game where I said that they, could have lost to a Saints team that's probably the worst team in the NFL. It's not just could have lost. I mean, you look at the actual stats. The Saints had more first downs. The Saints, were 5 for 14 on third down. The Saints had more yards per play. And there are some contextual reasons why, some of those things happened where they're chasing a little bit. But this was not a team that, clearly separated themselves from the team that's probably there with the Giants and maybe the Panthers and a few of those folks as like the worst team in the NFL, the Titans. If you get blown out by a big chunk of your schedule, then that potentially could be good for Marvin Harrison. I just think if you're going to be on this particular team where you really just basically need to get open and then Murray delivers you the ball, he's just not someone who can throw with timing. He's not someone who can throw with anticipation. He's not someone who can even see his receivers early in their routes because of the height issue. I mean, you need to be kind of a manufactured touch guy who catches the ball and really runs. And that's why Trey McBride is so, beautiful for this, because he can do the underneath stuff, catch it, and then run like an Autobot or whatever. That's just not what Marvin Harrison does well.
Yeah, that's true.
And yet, despite that, actually a very solid rookie season and a very good week 1, I think if you drafted him, especially within the context of if you could have drafted, Marvin Harrison or Terry McLaurin, I mean, that one is very clear, right? Now, one of the things about the Deebo Samuel discussion earlier is that eventually Terry McLaurin's going to be more involved, play better. And I think then you have to stop making the mistakes that Deebo Samuel made today if you want to continue to score well. But also Terry McLaurin just was many rounds overvalued, where, I mean, Marvin Harrison was a pretty solid pick at his ADP, and maybe he's going to end up being a great pick.
Saints also had way more penalties and penalty yards, 89 penalty yards, 13 penalties in this game. But yeah, more total yards. I mean, the Saints could have won, maybe should have won. The other team I really want to ask you about before we wind this down, I mean, there's probably a million other things we can talk about. I'm trying to scroll through and see the things we haven't hit on yet, but I think we've talked about most of it. I really want to get your thoughts on the Steelers-Jets game. And I told you that before. We talked a little bit. As you were kind of preparing, you were like, is there any of these games you kind of hope that I see? Because there was a few that you were still working through. And I said, yeah, I want to talk about that Steelers and Jets game. So I know you saw it. We talked about it a little bit. Kenneth Gainwell's the lead back the first half of the game. He ends up fumbling. I think he got the fumble back, but they took him right off the field. And I feel like Kenneth Gainwell was going to be the lead back for the whole game if he didn't fumble. So two parts of this. One is I was talking a little bit earlier about the what do you get when you're right thing with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, where I do think he probably can be a pretty huge hit. This was the take with the Jets. It's not that I didn't think these guys were talented. It was that I thought they'd have a lot of games that weren't very fun. And I guess I still think that. But Breece Hall undeniably looked fantastic. It was great to see because last year he had, some injuries, some issues, didn't always look as explosive as he had in the past, but especially early in this game, man, he looks like that player that 2 years ago, especially, we're talking about as the best running back in the NFL, super, super, super talented. Just like he could get into space at will and just be a downhill runner in traffic and just blowing through, piles of people. And then also the Garrett Wilson thing where it's like, man, we've just been waiting for him to get some opportunities and have some efficiency and have a good fit with a quarterback. And suddenly you watch this game and you're like, he's got it with Justin Fields. It's so cool. They play together in college, all that stuff. And we expected Garrett Wilson's efficiency to be better with Fields for a variety of reasons. One, that this is a better quarterback than he's really played with. Two, that Fields holds the ball so long in a way that actually winds up increasing the efficiency of the targets when they do get thrown, because he's not throwing the low probability passes just to avoid a sack or a scramble. He's taking off and running a bunch. So when he does throw it, it tends to be on the ones that are the higher probability throws that, of the possible throws.
And it kind of goes back to him being like a much better version of Kyler Murray and arguably being a better version, if he has a team around him, of Jalen Hurts, because none of those guys will actually throw the ball the way an offense is supposed to be run, in the same way that Russell Wilson has always refused to. But peak Russell Wilson would hold the ball until he had someone open, and then he would use the big, accurate arm and hit them. Jalen Hurts waits for people to get open and then decides to run or throw it away. And you have A.J. Brown out there like, what can the offense work on? Passing. I mean, that was the thing that kept popping into my head again on Thursday night, where, I mean, that line that he gave at the end of last season before they go on their Super Bowl run, and it gets completely forgotten, I think. Not forgotten. I mean, everybody remembers it like I do, but people don't think it matters because they went on the Super Bowl run. And then you watch that game against the Cowboys and you're like, yep, what this offense needs to work on is passing. I mean, I just no idea what's happening out here. Whereas with Justin Fields, he is so incredibly athletic in the scramble and in the speed. And then his arm is so big and so accurate that he can do these things. I mean, I keep going back, and this game was basically exactly what I would have hoped for when I had some of the answers in the Reddit AMA, where I was like, I mean, he's an incredible runner and he's got amazing arm talent. And his coaches, for whatever reason, have absolutely hated him and not allowed him to do the things that Russell Wilson was allowed to do, that Jalen Hurts has been allowed to do. And Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are absolute freaks. The thing that still concerns me is that outside of those guys, this team is extremely limited. I mean, you have them at crunch time having to rely on guys like Josh Reynolds and Jeremy Ruckert, and you're like, any play that's not to Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson is kind of a tragedy if it's not just Justin Fields running himself. That's going to be a problem. You do need to still have some more.
So
guys.
That was one of the big takes with the Jets going through like the projections process and stuff. And that's my question to you is, aren't these things still going to be this game shot out, right? And the teams went back and forth. And I want to talk about the Steelers too.
I mean, Cole Kmet was the tight end 8 in the season that Justin Fields played well. And no one gave him credit for that. No one gave him credit for DJ Moore actually having a good season. I mean, as far as we know, I mean, DJ Moore is basically just that Justin Fields season. Now, that's almost certainly not the case because he's also been like Garrett Wilson, where he's been forced to play just with terrible quarterbacks. But, I mean, so the funny thing is I was reading some articles about the Jets, right before the season started, where there were people following the Jets who were talking about them trading for like the Eagles backup and things like that, where, I mean, that's how bad Justin Fields looks in practice, because in practice, he's asked to run the offense and throw in rhythm and throw with anticipation and throw guys open. And he's just like, I realize there are quarterbacks who do that, but that's not the way that I play football well. Then you get out in the game and he looks like a superhuman, and you're like, you need to structure practice in a way that is going to reflect some of the things you're going to do in the game, which is just basically all freelance. But it seems like despite how poorly he's played in practice, that's what the coaching, and I loved Aaron Glenn's body language on the sideline. I think if you're going to go out there and like say, let's be physical and we're going to, do all these macho things, and then your guys come out and you break some big runs to start the game, I mean, you should be flexing over there on the sidelines. You should be excited. when your quarterback is giving you the long runs, and Fields took some massive hits in this game where he, put his body at risk for the team. I mean, your coach should be fired. It's just really too bad they lost this game because they did play better than the Steelers, who also did some really fun things, right?
Yeah,
and so
they're winning by double digits. The Steelers cut it to 1 score in the early fourth, and they unfortunately fumbled the ensuing kickoff, and the Steelers scored 2 plays later and take the lead. And like that was the game. I mean, that was a bummer, but that was the game.
So I guess I just hope that the team embraces
the Jets
with Justin Fields.
Let me finish that. The Jets rebound and go and score again, and then the Steelers make a 60-yard field goal to win the game. But I mean, Fields actually rebounded and went down and had a go-ahead touchdown on 4th down. That was pretty sweet for anyone who didn't see the whole end of the game. I mean, this is an awesome football game.
Then I have to say that my favorite position in fantasy football these days is kicker.
Chris Boswell, you went and picked him up on a bunch of teams. You were not satisfied with Jake Elliott's 8.8, put in some claims. I was like, I think I would have probably just taken the 8.8, and then Boswell's out here making 60-yarders, and I'm like, all right. Shawn the Kicker Whisperer strikes again. He's got Chris Boswell on all our teams.
I've watched some of these games and know what the scores are going to be like. I mean, some of the games this week, and maybe this isn't the case, but from watching the games, it feels like we're going to have fantasy football contests decided 65-64. And those long field goals are very definitive in those pillow fights.
So you do think the Jets offense could be pretty fun because you're obviously very, very high on Fields still, which is, I think, a very fair position. He looked really good, and this was the best offense he's been in. I mean, that was one of my big takeaways from watching this was that the whole Lions coaching staff coming over and all of these things. I mean, they put together an offense, a plan, a structure that was a lot of fun. We didn't see this massive split between Hall and Braylon Allen. I mean, it was Breece Hall's backfield. They're throwing to him out wide. They gave him 19 carries. They gave Braylon Allen 6. He does have a rushing TD, but I mean, a pretty big discrepancy. Hall's the clear lead. There was a lot of buzz out of camp. I'm not the only one. Like, I mean, there's people listening that are probably like, oh yeah, you thought Braylon Allen was going to take over the backfield. I mean, there was a lot of buzz. Not that he was going to take over, but he was going to be a lot more involved, and he was involved. But Breece Hall clearly had enough space to get the touches he needed and impact the game in the way that he did. I thought the Jets were fun.
Amusing though that this game was one of those examples where everyone involved in it was excited they were no longer on their previous teams or with their previous coaching staffs, because this is a game where the Jets offensive coaches, and so much of this is Aaron Rodgers' fault is my understanding, right? I mean, he's the one who set this stuff up, but the Jets offensive coaching staff was so bad that Breece Hall was tackled in the backfield on almost every play last season, which is why people want him traded, why people want Braylon Allen to play. Just like Travis Etienne, as soon as you get a viable coaching staff in there, you see the real Breece Hall, and you're like, yes, this guy could do the Saquon Barkley thing where he could be a massive fantasy success despite not having the right context to actually be a good scorer. You have Aaron Rodgers moving to the Steelers, and he's like, you know how bad our offense was last year, our coaching staff was last year? He's like, I'm going to thrive with Arthur Smith. That's how bad the situation was last year. But even that situation
looked
was so
like
bad.
A perfect fit.
The Justin Fields is like, getting away from Arthur Smith is what's going to rejuvenate my career. That's kind of the stepping stone of all of that, where the Jets were the bottom part of it that made everything else then fun. I mean, this was unexpectedly easily the best game of the day. And
yeah,
it was kind of funny because it doesn't end up actually being a big fantasy performance for DK Metcalf. There were all kinds of guys who actually were not very involved in their games who scored as many or more points. But for all the talk about how bad a fit he was going to be with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, they got him the ball and then he's running free and you're like, oh yeah, I mean, that dude is big and athletic.
Well, and I thought Rodgers looked really good, and he hasn't looked good for a while. And I feel like I've done a little of the Rodgers apologia in the last couple of years. Like, this guy can still throw the football in a way that in the modern NFL, you need to be able, the ways that you need to be able to read, first of all, both pre and post snap. And I do think he's capable of doing that. And then you need to be able to throw accurately to spots because there's always defenders trying to undercut stuff and move in different spaces. Rodgers has always been an accurate thrower. He's not at the same level that he was when he was in his prime with the Packers, but he had some throws today where you're like, this guy still has a tremendous amount of arm talent. The one after the fumble on the second snap, they get a touchdown. It's a TD to Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin's wide open. It's off play action. There is some pressure. It was vintage Rodgers from the perspective that after he does play action, he turns and he sees the guy and he gets it out while he's still backpedaling off the play action. He doesn't need to hit his back foot. Like so many quarterbacks need to plant and throw. And Rodgers is still moving back and it's like a fadeaway jumper. And he still throws a freaking laser because he does it. He's got the quick release. So he sees the guy. It's a quick release. The ball comes out on a seat, like on a line. It's got a ton of zip on it. And because of both of those things, he gets it out off his back foot on a line. It gets out to Calvin Austin so quickly. Yes, Calvin Austin's wide open, but one of the things I don't think people realize is that on a play like that, for a lot of quarterbacks, they need to kind of set their feet. They don't throw with as much zip, and a DB winds up in the play on the other end. They wind up breaking it up or laying a hit on or whatever. Rodgers, that play to me was like, that's why Rodgers can succeed in an orchestrated offense, which for my issue with Arthur Smith is that he over orchestrates everything. He's constantly trying to like get the ball into like his third tight end's hand because he's like, I'm a genius. But we know that he can design a good rushing attack and then pair it to a passing offense. It's like a play action passing offense and do some of the like quick screen stuff that he did with Jonnu Smith 2 years ago in Atlanta. And they did that with Metcalf, as you mentioned. They did a wide receiver screen to Metcalf and got him out in space, and he's running forever. And he had some other nice plays as well in there. But most of the touchdowns in this game, they're getting guys open into space. And the Jets are supposed to have a good defense as well. And if you're doing play action and you're getting Rodgers rolled out and you got a guy moving in space and he's open, he's going to have a quick release and he's going to get the ball into a catch and run situation where like he throws 4 touchdowns in this game. 2 of them are, one's a tip pass to Jonnu Smith, one's a little dump off to Warren. But the TD to Skoranek and Calvin Austin were very similar. They're what I'm describing, this sort of like open receiver in a catch and run spot. He gets the ball to him in space. I don't think Rodgers is going to have a massive season or anything like that. I felt like watching this offense, I was like, man, the Steelers they're probably going to be half decent in like offensively this year. I don't know how that manifests on the other end either because they're spreading the ball around quite a bit. You mentioned that Metcalf only had the 4 catches. Jonnu leads the team with 5 catches. He only has 15 yards. Calvin Austin also had 4. Freiermuth had 3. Gainwell had 3. Warren had 2. Skoranek has the 1. He's one of the guys who catches a TD. All 4 touchdowns go to different guys. It's kind of a weird day in that regard. But maybe Calvin Austin's worth picking up 4 for 70 in the touchdown. I mean, maybe there's a little bit in this passing game. Also, the running backs did not look good. Caleb Johnson basically didn't play. Gainwell plays a bunch, but didn't look good. I didn't think Warren looked particularly good. I mean, this may be a very pass-heavy version of Arthur Smith's offense. I thought the Steelers looked like I didn't think they looked amazing. They were going to get beat by the Jets. Like, they probably should have, if not for the special teams fumble. And then they get a 60-yard field goal on the other end. I think both these teams are going to play some games that are boring and slow-paced and all the things we were worried about. But I think we saw enough from both these teams in the modern NFL where there's not enough games where any offenses break out like this to be like, well, I mean, these offenses are going to have some fun games.
It'd be interesting to see, and it would be interesting to go through this game kind of forensically, with a lot more time than we have on a Sunday where we're trying to watch everything and to see how the defenses played it. I would not be surprised, knowing the coaches involved, if these defenses both, they want to be the identity of the teams. And they want to be a little bit more like what we talked about early in the show, where even back in the old days when defenses were just getting shredded by the passing game, there were a handful of defenses who could just dictate the game and shut you down. The types of things that defenses are no longer even trying to do in many cases. You're facing Justin Fields, who the Steelers were familiar with. You're facing Aaron Rodgers, who many members of the Jets are familiar with. You think you've got a good defense. It would not surprise me if these defenses thought they would be able to dictate to the opposing offense and gave up big plays that they either won't later or that most teams will not give up to these two offenses. Maybe it's hubris, maybe it's just a matter of, your early season execution, and maybe it's something I'm just making up entirely, right? But this game had the feel of an old school game in a way that I would kind of guess that most of the games for the Steelers and the Jets will not as we go forward. So basically just, the same thing that you're saying there. I think there's more reason for enthusiasm about the Jets than the Steelers. And there's probably not a path to DK Metcalf really returning any value at his price. He was significantly discounted over where he was a couple years ago. But A, we have plenty of new evidence to suggest that discount was justified. And then B, even in a positive game here, he doesn't really score. Now, if you score a touchdown, it changes, how this game works. And sometimes you're probably going to score touchdowns as DK Metcalf. But I think that mostly what we thought about the Steelers will still come to fruition. Jaylen Warren is the guy that I have a really hard time with and did draft on a few teams and really love the talent. And this was a weird game where he does, get that receiving touchdown, but it was a bad game for him. It's hard to have a game that's so bad for your future fantasy outlook when your two teammates also have terrible games. And yet they're saying this guy is going to be our guy. We just signed him to a new contract because we finally realize how good he is. We finally are willing to admit that he was way better than Najee Harris. We're willing to play him instead of this guy that we drafted on day 2 in a super deep running back draft where he didn't have to make that pick. And then they go play Kenneth Gainwell on all these snaps. And just what's the path to meaningful fantasy production from Jaylen Warren? Because the truth of the matter is, even with how poorly Caleb Johnson played, and I think I missed this play somehow, but you got the 1 carry for -2 yards and a fumble. So it's hard to be much worse than that in terms of your NFL debut. But he's going to play.
Fumbled on a kickoff.
Okay.
It wasn't on the 1 carry.
Okay. So I don't watch the kickoffs unless there are scores. This is a game where they scored 34 points and his two teammates played poorly and he scored a touchdown, and it's still not a meaningful fantasy performance.
Yeah, no, I felt the same way. I was like, I have Warren in some spots too. Where I have Warren, I was like, man, feel like I got bailed out by the receiving TD. But like I said, if Gainwell didn't fumble, I don't know if Warren would have got this receiving TD. If they took Gainwell out immediately after he fumbled and he recovered his own fumble, they pulled him out of the game. And maybe it was just his turn to sub out. I don't know. But he came right off the field. Warren played the rest of that series. And then I thought played a lot more. It was like late second quarter. And then Warren played most of the second half as well. But to that point, Gainwell was like the clear lead back. And it was like, what are we doing? But to me, the Warren thing was like, yeah, you get bailed out a little bit with the receiving TD. And then you feel like I need to get him out of my lineup somehow. I need to find a way to play other backs or other players, and he's got to be on my bench for now because, right now, Caleb Johnson's pretty clearly not a part of the offense and didn't do himself any favors fumbling in this game. But eventually they're going to use some Caleb Johnson too. And if Gainwell's playing enough and potentially even over you in some of the passing stuff, which maybe is like a Rodgers thing too. Maybe Rodgers prefers Gainwell back there for some reason, feels like he's a good pass protector or whatever. As one other thing I was thinking about as I was watching, I was like, I wonder if, Rodgers feels favorably about Gainwell or whatever. But if Gainwell's in there and Warren can't just consolidate the non-Caleb Johnson stuff, then as Caleb Johnson works into the offense as well, it's just a disaster. And Arthur Smith has done this so many times with the 3 backs and the different rotational stuff. And he was using Cordell Patterson last year. And Warren's still a very talented player. He's still going to have good games, but this is not what we're looking for in fantasy. That's probably one of the big takeaways when you're talking about sort of little bit ago about how, some of these offenses are going to play games where they have basically no plays and all that stuff. I mean, some of these situations where you have the rotational stuff and there's just no plays, you just don't want to have any access. I mean, not access. You just don't want them on your roster. You want to avoid that as much as possible. Like if I'm in a home league where I can make trades, I'm trying to deal Jaylen Warren this week probably. I mean, I think he's going to have good games. I'm not telling you to just trade him for nothing or whatever, but I more or less think that his, ceiling scenarios are very capped, and it's not going to be some kind of, thing that comes back to bite you in a major way. He's not going to have some league winning season not on your roster. So if you can get some value in a trade after he scores a touchdown in week 1, then I think that's probably a smart decision. Yeah, I mean, these situations where the offense is maybe not a top tier offense and you get these rotational things going on, that was sort of my concern with the Payton stuff, as we were always talking about the Broncos. But the difference is they have the potential to be a top tier offense, obviously.
And so many potential receptions to the front line running backs.
Tyler Badett.
Watching the game today with the Steelers, it just was so frustrating because you're thinking, I mean, Tyler Warren has actually been a very good receiving back, but you brought in a separate back because you want to throw a certain type of pass to a running back, which requires Kenneth Gainwell, as opposed to simply designing your offense so you can throw passes to Tyler Warren, who...
Jaylen Warren. You've said Tyler Warren a couple times now.
They're
the same guy. I've done it too. That's
what I was saying at that time. I was like, nope, that's not right. Then I was wondering if I'd said it previously, and you're like, yep, multiple times.
Twice now.
Well, in a perfect world, Colin would magically be able to just remove all of those, but we're going to leave those in. I did want to say...
No, you only said it twice, and they were both in the last few seconds, so it doesn't even matter. We've addressed it. I've said this. I've done the same thing a million times. What were we going to say, though, about Jaylen?
Well, it's kind of the opposite situation, I think, with Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit, where he has a terrible game today, only 50 yards, but the 10 receptions. We get a situation where Jahmyr Gibbs becomes even more fantasy-proof with all of these passes. Should we be terrified for Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams? Should we think that there's anything about Sam Laporta to be enthusiastic about? When I'm looking at this, I mean, he was wide open on a lot of these passes, which, some of that is just going to be the defense and who they've decided to take out, which, you want to take out Amon-Ra, you want to take out Jameson Williams, at least to an extent. We have Laporta, a lot of spots. We made the case that when he's cheap, you should get him. When he gets expensive, you pass him up because of the context. Is this a validation of that in any way? Or is it kind of a one-off? The Lions threw 39 passes. If they are a little bit worse as a team this year, we could get immense pass volume, which is something that in the previous season, you were relying on them to dominate a game and to execute drives to create the total pass volume and play volume. Or is it just kind of a week 1 situation where Amon-Ra is going to be fine. The question is going to be, is he going to be able to live up to ADP? It's one of the reasons why we usually passed on him and took someone like Puka instead. I mean, the Jameson Williams thesis becomes pretty tricky if the team is significantly worse than expectation.
I don't know that I buy that they're going to be. Jared Goff is... I mean, the split stuff, people scoff at it, but he's always been significantly worse outdoors. And they just played probably the best defense in football outdoors in their first game of the year and didn't get a ton of the preseason and all that. I didn't really expect a lot here. I took the under at stealing lines. Like I thought this game was good. The Packers with Love being injured and stuff, I thought might run the ball a little bit more. They did. And I thought the Lions outdoors and all this stuff, new coordinator, may not look great in their first game, and they didn't. So for me, it was a little bit of confirmation bias, I guess, because that was sort of my expectation coming in. But the way that I wrote it up in my notes was that I felt like Packers defense was the story of the game. I felt like they particularly were trying to take away the vertical stuff. Like they were clearly dropping into coverage, all these things that we're talking about, the cover 2 shell, all that. Like what I thought we saw with the Eagles on Thursday night. You're talking about Hurts. I mean, it's a perfect description of the way he played quarterback. He completed one pass more than 10 yards. Everything was underneath and scrambles and all that stuff. But some of that is also the defense was clearly dropping into coverage and rolling safeties over the top and taking away those things. That's why I continue to go back to the Dak response, because the Eagles are doing that too, that Dak was actually willing to try to fit those in, those throws in and trust his arm talent. And you have to be able to do that to a certain degree. To me, I felt like Goff didn't have those throws clearly, that they were, as you said, who the defense is trying to take away. I thought it had to have been Jameson. I mean, we haven't seen the whole back end and all 22, and not that I'm going to go back and study the all 22 to a huge degree. Usually I just infer this stuff based on what we're watching. But when Jahmyr Gibbs is catching 10 passes on 10 targets and he has space and they're just rallying to tackle him, he doesn't have enough space to get any yards on any of these. But clearly what Goff is seeing downfield is something that is triggering for him. This is when I go to Gibbs, right? And he does it 10 times. And then the other, the Laporta ones are the ones I can't really like describe, or I don't have a good thought on when you're asking sort of my thoughts on what it means for Laporta. Maybe he was just the forgotten guy by the game plan as you're describing, where they were focused on Jameson and Amon-Ra because he's wide open several times for big plays. I mean, he was the best thing they had going starting in the second half. Really, they didn't do it much in the first half, but I mean, Gibbs only has 50 total yards in this game on 9 carries and 10 catches. Laporta had 79 yards on his 6 catches, a very strong line. No one else in the offense had more than 50 yards. I think Amon-Ra is gonna be fine as you were describing, but also probably not live up to ADP as you were describing, in part because of the reasons that we weren't taking him. That it does look like Laporta is going to be a big part of this offense, and I do think Jameson will have his moments, and it'll circle back favorably to him in certain matchups. But I think there's some small signal here and some small areas of concern. And then also, I don't think it's going to be this bad. I think this is a very week 1 specific spot. The Lions are still very good. They still have a very good offensive line. They have a healthier defense at this point than last year. They didn't look competitive in this game, but the Packers are very, very good. And I do expect that, like, when these teams meet again in Detroit, that the Lions will look more competitive that time around. I think they're going to get better. They just got to learn this new version of their team a little bit. I don't think the Lions are going to be bad by any means.
Well, Ben, I think we have to finish out our first Sunday night episode of Stealing Bananas by massively victory lapping the fact that the broken-footed Jaden Reed caught 50% more passes than anyone else on the Green Bay Packers. That'll do it for Stealing Bananas. I'm Shawn Siegele. With me as always is Ben Gretch. You can follow, you know how to follow and all that, but I just want to again say, make sure you're subscribed to Stealing Signals. You have to get those pieces. Blair Andrews has a fantastic in-season plan built for us at RotoViz. Coupon code RDR2025 at checkout for 10% off your 1-year subscription. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.